The committee will come to order. Can they stay in here like that? Can those guys stay in here like that? What is she doing? Can they stay like that? What is the rule on the cameras? You always have some person in there. They can stay in the room. They can stay in the room. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess of the committee at any time. This hearing is entitled An Examination of Facebook and Its Impact on the Financial Services and Housing Sectors. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. Today, we're here to examine the impact of Facebook on the financial services and housing sectors. Our sole witness is Facebook's chairman and CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. Facebook's plans to create a digital currency, Libra, and a digital wallet, Calibra, raise many concerns relating to privacy, trading risk, discrimination, opportunities for diverse-owned financial firms, national security, monetary policy, and the stability of the global financial system. I and other Democrats have called for a moratorium on Facebook's development of its digital currency, Libra, and digital wallet, Calibra, until Congress can examine the issues associated with a big tech company developing these digital products and take action. As I have examined Facebook's various problems, I've come to the conclusion that it would be beneficial for all if Facebook concentrates on addressing its many existing deficiencies and failures before proceeding any further on the Libra project. Let's review the record. First, on diversity and inclusion. Facebook has utterly failed. Facebook's executive ranks and workforce continue to be mostly white and male. Since Reverend Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition called upon Silicon Valley companies, including Facebook, to release its diversity statistics more than 5 years ago, the representation of African Americans and Hispanics has increased by less than 2%. Facebook also told us that they have $0 managed by diverse firms. On fair housing, Facebook has been sued by the National Fair Housing Alliance for enabling advertisers to engage in discrimination on its advertising platforms. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has also filed an official charge of discrimination against Facebook for its advertising practices, including the company's own ad delivery algorithms. which were found to have a discriminatory impact when advertisers did not target their audience in discriminatory ways. I understand that Facebook has refused to cooperate with HUD's fair housing investigation by refusing to provide relevant data. On competition and fairness, Facebook is the subject of an antitrust investigation by the attorneys generals of 47 states and the District of Columbia. On protecting consumers, Facebook was fined $5 billion by the Federal Trade Commission for deceiving consumers and failing to keep their data private. On elections, Facebook enabled the Russian government to interfere with our election in 2016 with ads designed to pit Americans against each other, suppress the vote, and boost Trump. For example, Facebook allowed a counterfeit Black Lives Matter webpage to operate with the goal of discouraging African Americans from voting. 3 years later, these activities are still continuing on Facebook. We learned just this week that Russia and Iran are using the same tactics to meddle in our next election. Now on political speech. Last week, you announced that Facebook would not be doing fact-checking on political ads, giving anyone Facebook labels a politician a platform to lie, mislead, and misform the American people, which will also allow Facebook to sell more ads. The impact of this will be a massive voter suppression effort that will move at the speed of a click. Your claim to promote freedom of speech does not ring true. Mr. Zuckerberg, each month, 2.7 billion people use your products. That's over a third of the world's population. That's huge. That's so big that it's clear to me and to anyone who hears this list that perhaps you believe that you're above the law, and it appears that you are aggressively increasing the size of your company and are willing to step on or over anyone, including your competitors, women, people of color, your own users, and even our democracy to get what you want. All of these problems I've outlined, and given the company's size and reach, it should be clear why we have serious concerns about your plans to establish a global digital currency that would challenge the U.S. dollar. In fact, you have opened up a serious discussion about whether Facebook should be broken up. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the committee, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Waters. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for your appearance. Today is a trial on American innovation. There's a growing concern about the role that technology plays in our lives. That's warranted. That's necessary. Yes, technology has led to greater prosperity, more freedom of expression, and the ability to transcend the limits of space and time to connect us with one another. It's a powerful tool for our society, developed here in the United States, gone global. But we know there's also a downside to all of this. The vitriol on social media is frightening. The growing inequality between those who have access to the latest tech gadgets remain on the coasts, while folks living in rural America are still trying to get the same connectivity necessary to compete in a global marketplace. Not to mention the anxiety of the age. That's a deep cultural moment for us, not as politicians, but as Americans. That nervous feeling that you need to check your phone throughout the day. That's something that is now a cultural occurrence for all of us, especially members of Congress, most of whom in this room are doing that right now. There's a lot of anger out there, and now it's being directed at the architects of this system. That's why you're here, Mr. Zuckerberg. That's why you're here today. You are one of the titans of what we call the digital age. There's an enormous amount of responsibility, an enormous weight based off the innovation that you've wrought. And maybe it's not about Libra. It's not just about some housing ads, no. And maybe it's not really even about Facebook at all. It's that larger question. And fair or not fair, you're here today to answer for the digital age. But of course, you're not America's first innovator, and we hope you're not America's last. This is not the first time that America has faced difficult questions about technology. Sadly, throughout the history of innovation, a major theme is the exploitation of fear. Politicians, enabled by special interests and a lack of understanding of new technology, use fear to justify what is ultimately a power grab. New laws, new regulation, but ultimately old and tired ways to centralize power here in Washington or other systems of government. Some of this has led in the past to comical results, and we hope to avoid it now. But just as one example, there was a time when legislators pushed for what was then called red flag laws, which required vehicles, so-called horseless carriages of that age, to immediately stop on the side of the road and disassemble the automobile until equestrians or livestock was sufficiently pacified. But other times in history, the use of fear was not so funny. Our last hearing on Libra, for example, was a moment when members of Congress on this dais actually compared that technology of Libra to the terrorist attacks of September 11th.
Will the gentleman yield?
Look, I have my own
Making
qualms
a
about
reference to
Facebook
nice comment.
and
Will the
Libra.
gentleman yield?
The time belongs to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you for taking the bait. Look, I have my qualms about Facebook and Libra. I do. And the shortcomings of big tech. There are many, yes, there are. But if history has taught us anything, it's better to be on the side of American innovation, competition, and most importantly, the freedom to build a better future for all of us. Progress is not preordained. And American progress and American domination of free speech and global rights is not preordained. Let us not forget that the wave of innovation is spreading across the world, with or without us. So that's why I believe that American innovation is on trial this day in this hearing. And the question is, are we going to spend our time trying to devise ways for government planners to centralize and control as to who, when, and how innovators can innovate? Or will we spend time contemplating and leading the way on the question of whether or not it'll be American innovation that leads the next century, being led by American values, the notion that we have of the rule of law and free speech rights, and American-driven jobs and innovation? Are we going to spend our time building a brighter future for Americans or trying to tear each other apart? I yield back.
I'd like to welcome today's witnesses. Oh, actually, we only have one. Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Facebook. This is Mr. Zuckerberg's first appearance before this committee, but I believe that Mr. Zuckerberg needs no introduction. Mr. Zuckerberg, without objection, your written statement will be made part of the record. You will have 5 minutes to summarize your testimony. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will appear. At that time, I would ask you to wrap up your testimony so we can be respectful of the committee members' time. Mr. Zuckerberg, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your oral testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Waters, Ranking Member McHenry, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As we sit here, there are more than 1 billion people around the world who don't have access to a bank account, but could through mobile phones if the right system existed. And that includes more than 14 million people right here in the US. Being shut out of the financial system has real consequences for people's lives, and it's often the most disadvantaged people who pay the highest price. People pay far too high a cost and have to wait far too long to send money home to their families abroad. The current system is failing them. The financial industry is stagnant, and there is no digital financial architecture to support the innovation that we need. I believe that this problem can be solved, and Libra can help. The idea behind Libra is that sending money should be as easy and secure as sending a message. Libra will be a global payment system, fully backed by a reserve of cash and highly liquid assets. Now, I believe that this is something that needs to get built, but I get that I'm not the ideal messenger for this right now. We've faced a lot of issues over the past few years, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who wish it were anyone but Facebook who were helping to propose this. But there's a reason that we care about this, and that's because Facebook is about putting power in people's hands. Our services already give people a voice to express what matters to them and to build businesses that create opportunity. Giving people control of their money is important too, and a simple, secure, and stable way to transfer money is empowering. Over the long term, if this means that more people transact on our platforms, that'll be good for our business. But even if it doesn't, I still think this could help people everywhere. Before we move forward, there are important risks that need to be addressed. There are questions about financial stability, fighting terrorism, and more, and I'm here today to discuss those risks and how we plan to address them. But I also hope that we get a chance to talk about the risks of not innovating. Because while we debate these issues, the rest of the world isn't waiting. China is moving quickly to launch a similar idea in the coming months. Libra is going to be backed mostly by dollars, and I believe that it will extend America's financial leadership around the world, as well as our democratic values and oversight. But if America doesn't innovate, our financial leadership is not guaranteed. I actually don't know if Libra is going to work, but I believe that it's important to try new things, and as long as you're doing so responsibly. That's what has made America successful, and it's why our tech industry has led the world. So we co-wrote a white paper to put this idea out into the world and to start a conversation with regulators and experts and governance. And today's hearing is an important part of that process. What we're discussing today is too important for any single company to undertake on its own. And that's why we helped to found the Libra Association. It's a coalition of 21 companies and nonprofits that are working to give everyone access to financial tools. But even though the Libra Association is independent and we don't control it, I want to be clear. Facebook will not be a part of launching the Libra payment system anywhere in the world, even outside the US, until the US regulators approve. Last time I testified before Congress, I talked about taking a broader view of our responsibility, and that includes making sure our services are used for good and preventing harm. And I want to discuss that across other aspects of our work today as well. People shouldn't be discriminated against on any of our services. We have policies in place to prevent hate speech and remove harmful content, but discrimination can also show up in how ads are targeted and shown too. As part of a settlement with civil rights groups, we've banned advertisers from using age, gender, or zip codes to target housing, employment, or credit opportunities, and we've limited interest-based targeting for these ads too. This is part of our commitment to support civil rights and prevent discrimination. I also know that we need more diverse perspectives in our company. Diversity leads to better decisions and better services for our community. We've made diversity a priority in hiring, and we've also made a commitment that within 5 years, more than 50% of our workforce will be women, people of color, and other underrepresented groups. We've made some progress here. There are more people of color, women in technical and business roles, and underrepresented people in leadership at Facebook now. But I know that we still have a long way to go. Chairwoman Waters, Ranking Member McHenry, and members of the committee, this has been a challenging few years for Facebook. I recognize that we play an important role in society and have unique responsibilities because of that. And I feel blessed to be in a position where we can make a difference in people's lives. And for as long as I'm here, I'm committed to using our position to push for big ideas that I believe can help empower people. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. It is no secret that Facebook allowed Russia to undermine and divide our country through divisive online ads. The Senate's investigation discovered that African Americans were targeted the most by Russia, specifically in places where Black Lives Matter groups were the most active. Despite all of your technological expertise, Russia and Iran are at it again for the upcoming election. Then last week, you announced a new ad policy that gives politicians a license to lie so you can earn more money off this division, I suppose. Facebook changes the rules when it can benefit itself. Last year, Facebook banned all cryptocurrency ads on its platform because, and I quote, "they are frequently associated with misleading or deceptive promotional practices," quote unquote. Seems fair. Then earlier this year, Facebook rolled back the cryptocurrency ad ban, bought a blockchain company, and announced its own cryptocurrency. So tell us what changed. How did cryptocurrency go from being misleading and deceptive last year and then becomes a means for financial inclusion this year? It seems to me that you shifted your stance because you realized that you can use your size and your users' data to dominate the cryptocurrency market. You changed your policy when it benefits you. You reinstated cryptocurrency ads because you had plans to start your own cryptocurrency. So this brings me back to your new policy on political speech. My question to you is, how does this new policy benefit you? Because it seems that a policy that allows politicians to lie, mislead, and deceive would also allow Facebook to sell more ads to those politicians, thus making your company more money. But you can tell me, how does Facebook benefit?
Chairwoman, thanks for those questions. I'd like to address all of the things that you mentioned in there. On elections, you're right that in 2016 we were on our back foot in terms of preventing Russia from attempting to interfere in our elections. We've spent a lot of the last few years building systems that are more sophisticated than any other company has at this point, and frankly a lot of governments too, for defending against foreign interference. This Monday we announced that we had proactively identified a network of fake Russian accounts and a few networks of Iranian fake accounts that we proactively took down, which certainly, as you say, signals that these nation states are still attempting to interfere, but I hope will also give us some confidence that our systems are now more sophisticated to proactively identify and address these things. On your question about political ads, look, from a business perspective, the very small percent of our business that is made up of political ads does not come anywhere close to justifying the controversy that this incurs for our company. So this really is not about money. This is, on principle, I believe in giving people a voice. I believe that ads can be an important part of voice. I think especially in the political process for challenger candidates and for local candidates or advocacy groups whose message might not otherwise be covered by the media. Having ads can be an important way to inject your message into the political debate.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. Are you telling me, I think as you said to me before, you plan on doing no fact-checking on political ads?
Chairwoman, our policy is that we do not fact-check politicians' speech, and the reason for that is that we believe that in a democracy, it is important that people can see for themselves what politicians are saying. Political speech is some of the most scrutinized speech already in the world.
Do you fact-check on any ads at all?
Yes.
Describe what you fact-check on.
Well, Chairwoman, actually, thank you for the opportunity to clarify. Facebook itself actually does not fact-check. What we do is, we have feedback that people in our community don't want to see viral hoaxes or kind of
So
widespread.
let me be clear. You do no fact-checking on any ads. Is that correct?
Chairwoman, what we do is we work with a set of independent fact-checkers who...
Somebody fact-checks on ads. You contract with someone to do that. Is that right?
Chairwoman, yes.
And tell me, who is it that they fact-checked on?
Chairwoman, what we do is when content is getting a lot of distribution and is flagged by members of our community or by our technical systems, it can go into a queue to be reviewed by a set of independent fact-checkers. They can't fact-check everything, but the things that they get to, and if they mark something as false, then we...
All right, my time has expired, and someone else will continue on this line of questioning. And I now call on the gentleman from North Carolina, the ranking member, Mr. McHenry, to be recognized for 5 minutes.
So as I mentioned in my opening statement, I think there are bigger challenges and opportunities facing America than your ad model, or even the question of Libra. So let's start with your speech last week. Have you changed your view in terms of technology and China from before your speech on Friday to what we read and heard from your speech on Friday?
Congressman, no, I have not changed my views in the last week.
10 years ago versus today on your view of China and technology versus your speech on Friday.
Congressman, I think it's fair to say that my views have evolved. I probably 10 years ago would have been more optimistic that trying to work in China could have contributed to making a more open society. And today it seems that in some cases working in China not only does not do that, but compromises American companies' ability to promote our values abroad and around the world. And I think we've seen that in the last few weeks in a number of cases.
So you mentioned in your speech, you said a decade ago, 10 of 10 of the top companies on the internet were American. Now 6 of 10 are Chinese. So the question I have for you is, why are we seeing emerging technologies driven by blockchain projects and digital currencies being developed elsewhere, such as the case of Libra?
Well, Congressman, we have a lot of competition around the world. And you're right that over the last decade, pretty much all of the major internet platforms have been American companies with strong free expression values. And I just think that there's no guarantee that that is the state of the world going forward. Today, 6 of the top 10 companies are coming out of China and certainly do not share our values on things like expression.
So on that, why Switzerland for Libra? Why not the United States?
So the Libra Association is an independent association. We're trying to set up a global payment system. Switzerland is where a lot of the international organizations are. It also,
is there greater regulatory certainty in Switzerland than here in the United States for this type of technology?
I think Switzerland has certainly been forward-leaning on wanting to work through systems like this. But I don't want this to come across as if...
And the United States is not.
Well, Congressman, one of the things that I just want to be clear on is that the Independent Libra Association it's independent. We're a part of it. We helped stand it up. We don't control it. But I just want to make sure it's 100% clear to everyone today that my commitment running Facebook is that we're not going to launch anything that is a product or a part of this until we have full support from U.S. regulators, regardless of what the international regulators
the project of Libra internally, before you handed this technology, this idea over to the association. Let's think of this. Why would you have a project like that? Is it about competition with your peers globally? Is that a component?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
So you have no payments platform on Facebook. Facebook is not a payments platform. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in seeking to develop a payments platform internally, before you handed the technology over to the association for Libra, was that because of examples globally of competitors creating payments platforms?
Congressman, it was partially that, and it's partially because I view the financial infrastructure in the United States as outdated. So there are 2 sets of work that we do on payments. One is building payment systems that allow people to send money on top of the existing financial system that exists. That work is relatively less controversial. We're doing it around the world in different countries on top of existing payment systems. There's another set of work, which is what we're trying to do with Libra, which is trying to help rethink what a modern infrastructure for the financial system would be if you started it today rather than 50 years ago on a lot of outdated systems. I mean, I just look at the fact that you can send a text message to someone around the world.
Okay, but let me just drill down on this. Alipay has 900 million users. That is a global competitor, in my view, to Facebook. You see Alipay and WeChat Pay working. Why not just do a Facebook version of Alipay in order to level this?
Congressman, I think you're right that they're certainly competing not just with us, but all of the American companies on this. part of the infrastructure that they're building on is a lot more modern than some of what we would have to build on here. As soon as we put forward the white paper around the Libra project, China immediately announced a public-private partnership working with companies like that to extend the work that they'd already done with Alipay into a digital renminbi as part of the Belt and Road Initiative that they have. And they're planning on launching that in the next few months.
Thank you.
The gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Maloney, who is also the chair for the Subcommittee on Investor Protection, Entrepreneurship, and Capital Markets, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Zuckerberg, you said, and on page 3 of your testimony, that Facebook will not be part of launching Libra anywhere in the world until all the U.S. regulators approve. So which U.S. regulators are you talking about? There are actually many financial regulators, such as the Fed, the FDIC, the OCC, the SEC, the CFTC, the CFPB, FinCEN, FHFA, and many, many more. And to be clear, Libra would affect all of those regulators. So which of those regulators do you believe need to approve Libra before you will support the launch? And what kind of approval do you believe is necessary? Do you need to see written approval from each regulator? Will those approvals be public?
Congresswoman, thanks for the question. My understanding is probably all of them for different things. Different of these regulators focus on different areas, whether it's financial stability or fighting crimes and fraud and terrorism. Different areas of the work need to get done and are overseen by different regulators. I think the processes with each of them might be a little bit different, but we're committed to getting all of the appropriate U.S. approvals before launching the Libra payment system in any country in the world, even where those approvals might not be strictly required.
Just to be clear, will you commit to waiting until you get approval from every U.S. regulator that Libra affects before you'll support launching Libra? Yes or no?
Congresswoman, all of the regulators that have jurisdiction over a part of what we're doing, we are working with them and we'll seek approval from.
Okay. A bill of mine passed the House yesterday, which would crack down on anonymous shell companies in the United States, which has become a nightmare for law enforcement. They are the perfect vehicle for laundering money and for terrorism financing and criminal activity. Now, with the creation of various digital currencies, we face a new challenge with financial transactions being anonymous. That's why I am concerned that the use of anonymous wallets would make Libra attractive to those that are looking to launder money. It's my understanding that Libra wallet won't be anonymous, but I haven't heard anything about competing wallets. So will you commit not to supporting any other anonymous wallets for Libra? I consider this a national security issue.
Congresswoman, thank you for this question. I think it builds on a question that the chairwoman was asking before as well about our position on cryptocurrencies overall. Well, we see a range of different cryptocurrency projects out there, from completely decentralized and deregulated things to what we're trying to do is trying to build a safe and secure and regulated alternative. We think that the digital payment space needs that. Of course, as a big company, we're not going to do something that's unregulated or decentralized. We're going to work with the government to build something that gets to the same standard on anti-money laundering and CFT that all of the other world-class payment systems have, or exceed those standards. Sorry, I forgot the actual question. But
Yeah.
I was caught up in answering the chairwoman's question.
Well, I don't think you have, you can have strong anti-money laundering controls and anonymous wallets.
Right.
So I see this as a new loophole for criminals looking to hide and launder money. So what is your position on anonymous wallets? Will you commit that you won't have anonymous wallets, that it be transparent? Otherwise, we'll face the problems that we have with the LLCs, where they are hiding trafficking money, terrorism financing, criminal activity of all kinds. It's a huge problem for safety for Americans, and it's a huge problem for law enforcement. This is their number one concern, was this bill we passed yesterday with bipartisan support, but you're creating a whole new currency that could potentially be anonymous and could hide all types of criminal activity, which is a huge concern to the safety of Americans and national security.
Yes, Congresswoman, I will commit that Facebook will do what you are saying. Our version of this, our wallet is going to have strong identity, is going to work with all the regulators to make sure that we are at the standard of AML and CFT that people expect or exceed it. I can't sit here and speak for the whole independent Libra Association, but you have my commitment from Facebook.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri, the gentlewoman from Missouri, Mrs. Wagner, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here. When Libra was announced, 28 companies joined as founding members by signing a non-binding letter of intent to join the association. But in recent weeks, many of these founding members have dropped out of the association. Perhaps they're not so sure it's going to work either. PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, Stripe, Bookings Holdings, eBay, and Mercado Pago, you've lost these stable partners, I would say, and I find it highly concerning. Very briefly, what do you make of these sudden departures from the association, and why do a number of these founding members have concerns that whether you're up to the task of meeting our money laundering and regulatory standards?
Congresswoman, thanks for the question. And this project is too big for any one company to do on its own, which is why we set up this independent Libra Association with a number of other companies and nonprofits. It's a very complex project, and as you say, it's risky.
Why have they departed? I just wrote scores of stable partners have dropped out. Why?
Well, Congresswoman, I think you'd have to ask them specifically for.
Why do you think they dropped out?
I think because it's a risky project, and I think that there's been a lot of scrutiny.
Yes, it's a risky project. So let me move on to something that's near and dear to my heart. As you may know, I wrote and passed H.R. 1865, the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, widely known as FOSTA-SESTA. I am committed to rooting out online sex trafficking and believe that what is illegal offline should indeed be illegal online. 3 weeks ago, the New York Times ran a report titled, "The Internet is Overrun with Images of Child Sex Abuse." And I'd like this submitted for the record.
Without objection, such is the order.
16.8 million, as confirmed by the Department of Justice, of the 18.4 million worldwide reports of child sexual abuse material are on Facebook. 16.8 of the 18.4 million. These 18.4 million reports from last year included a record 45 million photos and videos. These are absolutely shocking numbers. Moreover, it's estimated that 70% of Facebook's valuable reporting to NCMEC, the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children, would be lost if Facebook implements its end-to-end encryption proposal. Mr. Zuckerberg, how much is this figure growing year after year? And if you enact end-to-end encryption, what will become of the children who will be harmed as a result that they're not reported?
Congresswoman, thanks. Child exploitation is one of the most serious threats that we focus on.
What is Facebook doing? 16.8 of the 18.4 million.
Well, Congresswoman, the reason those reports come from Facebook, the reason why the vast majority come from Facebook is because I think we work harder than any other company to identify this behavior and report it to NCMEC
are you
and
doing
the
to
FBI.
shut this down? These accounts peddle horrific illegal content that exploits women and children. What are you doing, Mr. Zuckerberg, to shut this down?
Well, Congresswoman, we build sophisticated systems to find this behavior.
16.8 million and growing Of the
Absolutely.
18.4 images?
Well, Congresswoman, I don't think Facebook is the only place on the internet where this behavior is happening. I think the fact that the vast majority of those reports come from us reflects the fact that we actually do a better job than everyone else of finding it and acting on it. And you're right that in an end-to-end encrypted world, one of the risks that I'm worried about, among others, to safety, is that it will be harder to find some of this behavior.
But you have said you want end-to-end encryption. What's going to happen of these children? They won't be reported then. And you are responsible. Facebook is responsible for 16.8 million of the 18.4
Well,
that
Congresswoman,
are out there last year alone.
Again, I believe that there are probably a lot more than 18 million out there, and I think we're doing a good job of finding this. But I think you're right that
What are you going to do to shut it down, Mr. Zuckerberg?
we're working with law enforcement and building technical systems to identify
Well, you're
more
not
of this harm
working
before it-
hard enough, sir. And end-to-end encryption is not going to help the reporting process. I'm over my time. I have many more questions for you that I'll submit for the record, but we're going to talk about this, and I yield back. Thank you.
The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zuckerberg, Libra has pledged it will not share account information or financial data with Facebook or any third party without customer consent. However, Facebook has had a history of problems safeguarding users' data. In July, Facebook was forced to pay a $5 billion fine to the FTC, by far the largest penalty ever imposed to a company for violating consumers' privacy rights as part of a settlement related to the 2018 Cambridge Analytica scandal. So let me start off by asking you a very simple question. Why should we believe what you and Libra are saying about protecting customer privacy and financial data?
Well, Congresswoman, I think that this is an important question for us on all of the news services that we build. We certainly have work to do to build trust. I think that the settlement and order that we entered into with the FTC will help us set a new standard for our industry in terms of the rigor for the privacy program that we're building. We're now basically building out a privacy program for people's data that is parallel to what the Sarbanes-Oxley requirements would be for a public company on people's financial data. In terms of audits internally, any manager who's overseeing a team that handles people's data has to certify quarterly that they're meeting their commitments, and that goes all the way up to me, and I'll have to certify that on
Thank you for your answer. It has been publicly reported that when you acquire WhatsApp, Facebook officials coached the company's founder to tell European Union regulators that it will be, and I quote, really difficult to merge or blend data between Facebook and WhatsApp, and that there was no desire to integrate the two systems. Mr. Zuckerberg, 18 months later, the platforms were linked. The European Union fined Facebook for providing incorrect or misleading information. So let me ask you, do you understand why this record makes us concerned with Facebook entering the cryptocurrency space? Do you realize that you and Facebook have a credibility issue here?
Congresswoman, I understand that we have work to build trust on this, and that means making commitments, and even if we learn new things in the future that could change our mind on how we should operate, that I think we're going to need to make sure that the commitments that we make.
Have you learned that you should not lie?
Congresswoman, I would disagree with the characterization
Well,
that was lying.
you say you went to the European regulators and you said that it will not link. It will not, that it will be impossible. And yet, 18 months later, it happened. And you were fined for that.
Congresswoman,
Let's continue. I hope that you learned something about that, about not lying. Facebook internal motto was, for a long time, move fast and break things. Mr. Zuckerberg, we do not want to break the international monetary system. Last week, the G7 released a report stating that global stablecoins could have significant adverse effects, both domestically and internationally, on the transmission of monetary policy as well as financial stability. Given the G7's concerns and the concerns voiced by us here today, would you commit to a moratorium on launching Libra until Congress can develop, not the regulators? You said before that you will not move until all the regulators sign into and support for you to move forward. Here, Congress, the People's House, needs to have the opportunity to work on a legal framework so that we provide the guidance to the regulators. Would you commit to that, yes or no?
Congresswoman, my understanding is that Congress exercises significant oversight over the regulators through these committees. So that would seem to me like the appropriate way for that to happen.
So that is a no. Thank you.
The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, the problem of addressing underbanked and unbanked individuals is both real and important. However, a significant portion, and I know the Libra project is intended to reach this population. However, a significant portion of the underbanked simply do not trust banks. I suspect they may not trust captains of industry or members of Congress either, for that matter. Do you see this as being a major hurdle in the wide adoption of Libra?
Congressman,
How do you persuade those people that you're trustworthy and to use the system?
Congressman, we've certainly had a lot of issues over the last few years, but I think it's worth remembering that every day billions of people come to our services because they trust that they can share content, messages, photos, comments with the people they care about, and more than 100 billion times a day, people do that. They share something with a set of people because they know that that content is just going to reach the people that they want it to. So I think that if we're able to move forward with this project, there may be some people who don't want to use it because they don't trust us or don't like us, and that's one of the values of having an independent association where there will be other competitor wallets and other approaches too. But I think that this is an area where being able to put ideas out into the world and letting the market work and letting people choose for themselves what they trust and what services they want to use is probably the right approach.
I just suggest that it will take a lot of energy and effort to reach that group, the underbanked, the unbanked, and it's real and it's growing more substantially. But let's shift focus for just a moment. I also serve along with Congressman Posey on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and those of us who've worked on that committee know, as all of us do, that the digital images can be altered to make it nearly impossible to distinguish between what is real and what is not. Facebook recently launched the Deep Fake Detection Challenge in collaboration with Microsoft and others to address this problem. Now, this seems like a step in the right direction on behalf of the technology companies involved. From your perspective, how great is a threat is the deceptive use of deep fake technology, and in what ways do you anticipate that the detection challenge will be successful?
Thank you, Congressman. I think deep fakes are clearly one of the emerging threats that we need to get in front of and develop policy around to address. We're currently working on what the policy should be to differentiate between media that has been manipulated by AI tools like deepfakes with the intent to mislead people, and compare that to just normal content that might have been an interview that might have just been cut differently, and someone might not like the way that it's cut, but is not a deep fake and is not kind of misleading, manipulated content in that way. So we're working on that policy. I think that this is a very important area. The deepfake challenge to technically figure out how to identify these things will certainly help inform the policy, and this is one of the areas that I do think is quite important going forward.
One final question. Many experts have suggested that we need to educate the public on how to consume trusted information. Facebook recently announced an initiative to support projects on media literacy. Could you elaborate on these projects and what you see as Facebook's role, given your critical position within the industry?
Yes, Congressman. This question may be premature to ask, although later in this week we actually have a big announcement coming up on launching a big initiative around news and journalism, where we're partnering with a lot of folks to build a new product that's supporting high-quality journalism. You know, I think that there's an opportunity within Facebook and our services to build a dedicated surface, a tab within the apps, for example, where people who really want to see high-quality curated news, not just social content, but from high-quality publishers can go and consume that content, and that could create a place where we can form new business partnerships to help fund high-quality journalism as well. So I'm looking forward to discussing that at more length in the coming days.
You'll back the balance of my time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, who is also the chair for the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Financial Institutions, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zuckerberg, you came in and your opening statement sounded great. I think that your advisors advised you to what we wanted to hear, an interest that you think that members of Congress on various sides wanted. But words are different than action, sir. One of the first things that I heard you say when you were testifying was that you were interested in the unbanked and the underbanked. I chair, as the chairwoman said, the Consumer Protection and Financial Institutions Subcommittee. We had a hearing yesterday with dealing with what we call MDIs, Minority Depository Institutions. Facebook is a multi-billion, trillion-dollar company. You concerned about the underbanked and unbanked? How much of Facebook's money is in MDIs that would provide services and help the unbanked and the underbanked? Have you invested in any of the minority development depository institutions in America or any place else in the world? Any of your money are sitting in those banks?
Congressman, I'm not sure of the answer to that question, but what I do know is a lot of the people that we serve around the world are underbanked, and this is beyond the U.S. as well.
Well, I understand it's beyond the U.S., but we're here right now. And you've just indicated that you want to work and you would not move anyplace else unless you were in compliance with the U.S. regulators, et cetera. And what I'm saying is that, for example, I don't even know when you talk about internationally whether or not going after the unbanked and underbanked, whether or not you intend to have Libra and your digital wallet register in each of those countries so that there would be a regulatory oversight. Because what we have found is a lot of individuals, we have payday lenders who say, we're interested in the underbanked. We're interested in those that are not banked. And those individuals who are supposed to be helped pay more than anybody else. We've got institutions here, minority, depository institutions. And if you want to show that you're doing the right thing, then with all of the money that you have, you can do it here in the United States and other places also. So that is an answer that you should know. And I would urge you to go back and find out. And I would almost guess that there's $0 there. And you should be thereby then look at your policy and change it. Because action speaks much louder than words. And you do have a trust factor. I mean, I met with a lot of your investors who are pulling out of Libra. Let's just look at the news, because the other thing that's most important to me is our democracy and democracies around the world. Now, you tell me, when you look at around the world, it seems to me that Facebook was an accelerant in many of the destructive politics of today. For example, 2016, Russia interference with U.S. elections. You've admitted that you were caught on your heels. Question is, what has been and what will be done for 2020? Brexit, another big issue around the world. Misinformation and divisions, attempts at division and misinformation across North America and Europe. Facebook has been systemically found at the scene of the crime. Do you think that's just a coincidence? Sir?
Well, Congressman, we operate in almost every country in the world except for China and North Korea, so I think we would be in almost every country where different activities are happening. One thing that you mentioned before that I agree with is there are a lot of predatory financial organizations. We ban payday lenders and a lot of folks like that from using our platform for ads as well. That's certainly, we're not interested in.
But what I'm talking about, not only banning, you can put you have the wherewithal, because if these MDIs had the money, then they would be able to put the product, because these folks need access to capital and financial institutions. I'm out of time.
Thank you. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Ranking Member McHenry for holding this very informative hearing. For many of us, Facebook is a reality in our business and our personal lives. I communicate with my constituents as well as my friends through the platform daily. Many benefits accrue from the service, yet in the midst of these great benefits, great challenges have emerged, and I want to welcome you to this hearing. Mr. Zuckerberg, I believe Facebook is a great innovation that has much potential for good, that we welcomed an innovation together with the controversies that it spawned. Unfortunately, some in politics and the media see their role as cajoling Facebook to censor its users' speech. In April, I wrote you that I was disappointed that Facebook would consider restricting free speech rights to communicate the risk associated with vaccinations. I support vaccinations of children and adults, but I also support open and frank communication of the risk of vaccination. Every person should make vaccination decisions with full information. In recognition of the uncertainties, the risk of vaccinations, the federal government has created a vaccination trust fund that has paid out over $4 billion to compensate those who have been injured by vaccinations. There's no more clear or persuasive statement about the risk associated with vaccinations than the existence and the payment record of that fund. From time to time, medical research has established case and context of specific risks associated with vaccinations. I wrote to you when another member of the House made claims that the risk of vaccination should not exist and that Facebook should police communications related to the vaccination risk. Today you testified you believe in giving people a voice, and Mr. Zuckerberg, is Facebook able to assure us that it will support users' fair and open discussions and communications related to the risk as well as the benefits of vaccinations?
Congressman, thanks for the question. We do care deeply about giving people a voice and freedom of expression. Those are some of the founding values of the company. At the same time, we also hear consistently from our community that people want us to stop the spread of misinformation. So what we do is we try to focus on misinformation that has the potential to lead to physical harm or imminent harm. And that can include especially misleading health advice. There was a hoax that was going viral a number of months back that
Let's
was
kind
saying...
of stick to this subject because our time is very limited. Are you 100% confident that vaccines pose no injury to any person on this planet?
Congressman, I don't think it would be possible for anyone to be 100% confident, but my understanding of the scientific consensus is that it is important that people get their vaccines.
But you said your platform, you want to, you believe in giving people a voice. Shouldn't somebody have the opportunity to express an opinion different from yours? I mean, over $4 billion has been paid out by the fund, over thousands of people. Don't you think people should be able to have information to make an informed choice?
Congressman, I do. And that's why we don't stop people from posting on their page something that's wrong. Right? If someone wants to post vaccine, anti-vaccination content, or if they want to join a group where people are discussing that content, we don't prevent them from doing that. But what we do is we don't go out of our way to make sure that our group recommendation systems try to show people or encourage people to join those groups. Okay. We discourage that.
Okay, well, how do you discourage it?
Well, there are a number of different tactics. For example, if someone is typing in into the search results, into the search box, something that might lead to anti-vax content, we don't recommend anti-vax searches to them. If you type in the name of a group exactly, you can get the group. We're not going to hide it. We're not going to prevent you from joining it. But we're not going to recommend or go out of our way to show people content that would encourage people to join those groups. But
Well,
people can share that content
many
if
of
they
the people
want.
harmed by this policy are in fact parents with disabled children, and I don't think we or you should be so quick to turn our backs on them. If you look at the statistics, I think you're making a bad mistake. Time has expired. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next gentleman from California is Mr. Sherman, and today is his birthday. Happy birthday, Mr. Sherman. You're recognized for 5 minutes. You don't get any more just because it's your birthday.
Donald Trump said crypto assets can facilitate unlawful behavior, including the drug trade. I ask unanimous consent to put in the record a report by Rand talking about cryptocurrencies use by terrorists. Hopefully without objection.
Without objection, such is the order.
Not here to be anti-Facebook. I was anti-cryptocurrency back when you were anti-cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency either doesn't work, in which case investors lose a lot of money, or it does achieve its objectives, perhaps, and displaces the U.S. dollar as or interferes with the U.S. dollar being the sole reserve currency, or virtually the sole reserve currency in the world. That role of the U.S. dollar saves the average American family $1,000 in interest costs because money pours into the United States because of the role of the dollar. The Federal Reserve can turn over up to $100 billion in profits to the U.S. Treasury that we in Congress spend because of the power of the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is an excellent currency as a means of account. It serves all the needs except it's really bad for tax evaders, drug dealers, terrorists. And that unmet need can be met by a new currency. If we make drug dealers just 10% more effective, how many American deaths is that over the next decade? Does it compare to the deaths we experience from terrorism? We'll have to see. But those who are introducing cryptocurrency have got to pause and wonder what effect they'll have on the power of the United States to impose sanctions. Right now, Turkey is stopping at 20 miles into Syria, not because of U.S. troops, we're out, but because of U.S. sanctions, because of the role of the U.S. dollar. We stand to lose all that because cryptocurrency is the currency of the crypto patriot. Ms. Velasquez pointed out that you're going to wait for regulators to sign off. Regulators are working with old statutes. Your lawyers are going to show that there's a loophole in a 1940 Investment Company Act that gets you where you want to go, and the regulators can't stop you, and you're going to call that regulatory approval, as if the people in 1940 knew what you had in mind. What you've made clear is that you will go forward unless Donald Trump-appointed regulators stop you, and you will go forward if you can just find loopholes in statutes, but you'll deploy a mountain of a horde of lobbyists to prevent us from writing a new statute. Ms. Maloney asked you a question that you forgot. You still forgot to answer it, but let's be clear. You're going to be making powerful burglary tools and letting your business partners commit the burglary. You are going, with all the power of Facebook, to try to create a new currency. You're going to call it the Libra, but you're the person behind it. That's why I call it the Zuck Buck. You are going to create it and then say, oh, it's our business partners. Your white paper says your business partners are going to use your tool to have anonymous accounts, and then you have the gall to come here and say you're going to follow all the know your customer. How do you know your customer with an anonymous account? Then Mr. Meeks calls your bluff on this idea that you're creating a payment system for the poor and unbanked. The poor and unbanked need pesos. They need dollars that they can buy something at a local store. You've done no effort to help the unbanked anywhere else at any other time. And you should. You should create a payment system with a close to zero fee. But the real money is in the tax evaders and to some extent the drug dealers. I know you've got at least 100 lawyers that will tell you that what you're doing is legal and that you will be safe. But given the harm that this can do, they could be very wrong. And if this explodes the way it might, especially you will not be able to hide behind the idea that you didn't create the Libra organization, that it's just your business partners that have wallets designed for drug dealers and terrorists. I have a few more things to say, but for the richest man in the world to come here and hide behind the poorest people in the world and say that's who you're really trying to help. You're trying to help those for whom the dollar is not a good currency: drug dealers, terrorists, tax evaders.
Thank you. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Zuckerberg. I certainly admire you as an innovator and an entrepreneur. You've taken advantage of the economic freedom of this country, and I admire that. I think that's fantastic. But you now are trying to get into a different world here with this, with your Libra experience here. You know, in the past, you've been dealing with communication systems where people are able to exchange everything from retail information to personal information, and it was kind of buyer beware in the retail world. In the financial world, people transact business because they can trust that the transactions are going to be secure from the standpoint of the stability of the dollar or whatever they're exchanging their money in. There's the secrecy of the activity. There's consumer protections as well as you know, not being able to do things in a illegal fashion. So that takes a lot of regulation. And as you're finding out, regulation is an important part of the financial services world to be able to give people those kinds of protections and earn that trust. So you've indicated already that you want to conform to the regulation to be able to do this and earn that trust. Can you continue to, the first question is, can you continue to innovate and be able to make the changes to this product as it needs to be able to conform to the regulation and still be able to make this work? Do you believe that that can happen?
Congressman, I currently do. I think we'll have to see how this process plays out, but I do, sitting here today.
Are you willing to stop this project if you see that it can't go forward anymore?
Congressman, I will certainly stop Facebook's part of it. The Independent Libra Association is a separate thing that exists at this point, and if I feel like Facebook can't be a part of it in keeping with the principles that I've laid out, then Facebook won't be a part of it.
I want to follow up on Mr. Sherman's line of questioning with regards to the reserve currency. What effect do you think that you get implemented, Libra implemented here, that what this would have on the reserve status of the U.S. dollar?
Congressman, because the reserve will be primarily U.S. dollars, I actually think that a project like this could be important for extending America's financial leadership and to the contrary of the risks that are being pointed out. We have to be careful about all of the risks around financial stability, and there are certain regulators who oversee that, and we're also mindful of that. We want to do something that strengthens America's leadership. But I just think that we can't sit here and assume that because America is today the leader, that it will always get to be the leader if we don't innovate. And innovation means doing new things,
Okay.
and that does mean, and the new things have risks, and we need to address the risks, and we need to be careful in doing that. But I personally worry that if we don't do things like this, whether it's this project or others like it, then eventually we lose our leadership.
My time is, I appreciate the fact that you're pointing out that China is already doing this. That means if we're going to allow them to play in this area, we need to be looking at it as well. And I think right now the Libra says that 50% of the currencies that are in the basket here that they use to set the value of this is $1. Is that correct?
Congressman, I don't know if that's been fully finalized, but I think the principle is that it will be primarily
My
US
concern,
dollars.
though, is that right now that's good for the United States, but what happens whenever the board of Libra decides that, the Chinese yuan suddenly is, because of the economy, looks to be a very stable currency and a growing currency and importance in the world, and suddenly they diminish our amount down to 1/3 of the value of the basket of currencies, and now the yuan is 1/3, and suddenly now we have a really big problem from the standpoint that the currency that is being utilized most around the world is the Libra, and we are only 1/3 of that. That to me is concerning. Does that concern you at all? That the association could set this and we would have nothing about it, and it would be a negative effect on our position?
Congressman, that is certainly something that I think we should look at up front. And I can't speak for the independent association on this, but I think it would be completely reasonable for our regulators to try to impose a restriction that says that it has to be primarily U.S. dollars.
Okay, one more quick question, and I don't know if the chairman will give me enough time for you to answer this, but what is the advantage of Facebook to be involved in Libra?
Sorry, what is the advantage of having Facebook be involved
your
here?
company, Facebook, to be involved in Libra? What is the end game for you to be able to realize a benefit from this?
Well, Congressman, we build some of the most widely used messaging services around the world, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And the vision here is to make it so that people can send money to each other as easily and securely and cheaply as it is to send a text message. So I think that sending money would be a very useful utility to add for people around the world in addition to the messaging products that we have.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, who is also the chair for the subcommittee on Housing, Community Development, and Insurance, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zuckerberg, the Housing Rights Initiative, a DC-based watchdog group and an aggrieved DC woman, have recently filed human rights complaints in DC and Maryland against 7 major housing companies who are accused of using Facebook's ad targeting tools to deny prospective tenants the ability to see housing ads based on their age, which is a protected class under local fair housing laws. The lawsuit also alleges that Facebook's algorithm disproportionately showed the ads to younger users. Mr. Zuckerberg, do you agree to comply with any potential subpoenas and document requests Facebook might receive seeking information about how housing companies have discriminated?
Congressman, I imagine that if it's a valid subpoena, we will certainly comply with it. Our legal team will.
Well, will Facebook agree to produce information about the algorithm it uses to decide which ads users receive?
Congressman, for A bit of background here. It has always been against our policies for people to use any of our products, and especially our ad products, to discriminate. We recently, as you know, entered into a settlement with the ACLU and other civil rights groups to remove certain targeting features from advertising, so that way, if you're doing targeting for housing, employment, or credit opportunities, you can't target based on age or gender or zip code. And we also limited the number of interest-based targeting options that were available there as well.
Yeah, but for so many years, your company engaged in that kind of conduct. Was that because it was a lack of awareness as far as your employees are concerned, as far as having a sensitivity to inclusion, diversity, and non-discrimination?
Congressman, it's always been against our policies for anyone to use the ad systems to discriminate, and we enforce those policies through a mix of technical systems and human review. When this complaint was filed by the ACLU and others, we were able to reach a settlement that we thought would strengthen our policies and our products and help them uphold the principles that we care about and have always been committed to on this. Part of this is also agreeing to study further the effects of how the algorithm works and what it shows. One of the challenges that we have here that I think it's worth calling out is that we don't collect data on the race or ethnicity of people who use Facebook. So that is somewhat of a challenge in trying to study whether there are disparate impacts or issues. And it's an open question from my perspective whether one would want us to collect race data on the people who use our services, but that's one of the questions that we'll need to figure out as we're studying this further.
And let me follow up with that and ask, despite Facebook's commitments to address civil rights, there is no one in Facebook's senior leadership with substantial civil rights experience. Why is this?
Congressman, this is certainly something we care about a lot. We have people at the company who've worked on civil rights. Recently, we started this civil rights audit that's being led by very established folks in the civil rights movement, and Sheryl Sandberg, our COO, is personally leading a civil rights task force that we've formalized inside the company to make sure that we implement suggestions from the audit and to make sure that this receives senior attention at the company.
Is the audit independent? Is it independent or is it from within the company?
Congressman, yes, the audit is independent. It is being done by Laura Murphy, who I think is an established leader in the space.
Familiar with Laura Murphy? Are they allowed to publicly report whatever problems they find?
Congressman, yes, the reports that they're making as part of the audit will be public, and I think that they've already also published some things.
Do you have a right to limit what is said publicly about the audit?
Congressman, I'm not sure the answer to that. I think at a high level the answer would be no, but there may be some specific things around if there's individuals' private data or business confidential data or something like that where they might not publish it. But broadly speaking, they're going to be able to publish what they believe and what they find.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huizinga, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Zuckerberg, you have accomplished something that nobody, and I mean nobody, thought was possible. Brad Sherman, Chair Waters, many on the other side of the aisle, actually agree with and, in fact, use tweets by the president to support their position. I never thought I would see the day, but here we are. You have taken the puzzle pieces of politics, shaken up the box, thrown them out on the table, and everybody's trying to figure out where they fit when it comes to Facebook and when it comes to this technology use. I don't fault you for what your tool has become, because I do believe it is a tool. I want to explore that a little bit, but first my question is, what share of Libra is Facebook? I know it's an association. I'm sorry, of Libra is Facebook. So it's an association that you've referenced. I mean, do you own half of it? Is it equal shares among all the partners? David Marcus, who had been at Facebook, is heading up Calibra. Is it one and the same? Is Calibra Facebook?
Okay, Congressman, there are two organizations here. There's the Independent Libra Association.
Yep, that's what I'm wanting to get to know.
Which is a nonprofit, so it's not a for-profit
Yes.
entity that there's ownership.
So but how does the vote, here's what I'm trying to get at. How does the voting go? Is it what David Marcus says? Is it what Facebook says? Or is it you can be overruled by others in the association?
That's correct. Right now, there are 21 companies and nonprofits. There are a lot more that want to join. Each company and nonprofit organization that's a member has one vote in electing the board. Right now, there are 5 board members. David Marcus is one of the board members, but is not running Calibra.
Well, he's been here, in fact, sat where you sat.
Sorry, I just misspoke. He's not running Libra. He is running Calibra, which is Facebook's payment subsidiary. But we are looking for the Libra Association is recruiting an independent director, and David is not even on the search committee for that.
Okay, so here's, I asked him the question because it had been put forward that Switzerland was where you were going to domicile this, or the association was going to domicile. He had said that he had been talking to the Swiss regulators. The Swiss regulators said that he hadn't been talking to them and that the association hadn't been talking to them. So I'd like you to clarify that. Have you been talking to the Swiss regulators?
Congressman, yes. And the misunderstanding there was that I believe that he and the team had been working with the primary Swiss financial regulator, FINMA, and now we're also working with the data regulator, which is going to be relevant.
You say that you've worked with 30 different jurisdictions in examining this. Can you provide us with a list of the regulators that you have talked to?
Congressman, I can get back to you with the full list.
Okay, that'd be great. That's all I want. It's not a trick question. Just want to know that. I'd also like to know which U.S. regulators you have been talking to.
Congressman, are you asking about me personally or our team?
Well, I mean, you used the royal we on page 3 of your testimony. I'm assuming it's not you specifically. I'm assuming it's you and your team. But I want to know who Facebook and Calibra and Libra have all been talking to in the U.S., because I think one of the questions that I have is why Switzerland and why not the U.S., a little bit about as the ranking member had started to go down there. And I want to move quickly on that, though, but will you get me a list of those U.S. regulators?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, here's the real crux. You said that you won't launch without U.S. regulator approval. What happens if the association decides to launch despite that?
Congressman, then I believe we would be forced to leave the association. I would hope that that the association will weigh our recommendation and what we say publicly that we think should happen. But if at the end of the day we don't receive the clearances that we feel like we need to move forward, and the association chooses to move forward without us, then we will be in a position where we will not be a part of the association.
My remaining 30 seconds here. As I said, I believe Facebook is a tool. I believe cryptocurrency and Libra is a tool. I believe all technology is a tool. It's a neutral tool, just like a car, a plane, a gun, a knife, all of which have been used at weapons for nefarious things at times, and all of things that have been used to benefit. These various tools are in society, though, regulated. And whether it's Ms. Wagner's concern and all of our concern about child sexual exploitation or others, you need to help us understand where the line between people's First Amendment rights, yours, mine, all of society's lie, and the safety of our society, regardless of the platform or tool. So I'd like to continue that conversation at some point.
The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Zuckerberg, thank you for joining us today. Back during the 1960s and 70s, Congress passed a series of laws intended to stamp out discrimination in lending and housing. And both Republicans and Democrats in Congress worked together and passed legislation like the Community Reinvestment Act and the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. All of these laws were designed to target and stop discrimination in the sale and advertising of housing, and in particularly redlining. Redlining is a series of practices of cordoning off certain groups of people by race, by geographic area, and systematically refusing to lend to those communities. And we're even suffering right today from the aftershock of these practices. Now, it's my understanding, Mr. Zuckerberg, that Facebook allows advertisers to target their messages to certain users or groups of users, both directly by identifying their race, their gender, or age, but also by indirectly targeting their education, their interests, their location, their income. And in its investigation, HUD, our federal housing agency, found that your platform allowed advertisers to restrict certain users from viewing ads on your platform. And you have even enabled the practice of this dreaded redlining of certain communities, restricting them from housing and employment opportunities. You were charged with this by our federal agency that protects our housing and lending laws. And Mr. Zuckerberg, we in Congress have worked hard for the past 50 years to eliminate the very racial discrimination practices that your platform is guilty of. On your platform, you screen for and you prevent all sorts of criminal activities, such as sex trafficking, drug trafficking. Even as you mentioned a few minutes ago, you outlaw payday lending, terrorism, illegal drugs. Why don't you prevent redlining, which is also illegal and criminal as well?
Congressman, we do now. Our policies have always been that discrimination is not allowed. We recently entered into a settlement with civil rights groups, ACLU and others, and NFHA to remove certain categories from our targeting, including age, gender, and zip code.
You say to remove.
It's implemented.
You haven't said we have removed. There's a difference.
My understanding is this is already implemented. If I'm incorrect on that, I will get back to you quickly and update you. But my understanding is that is already in effect.
But Mr. Zuckerman, I have here HUD's report. And it clearly says that your platform allows advertisers to restrict certain users from viewing ads on your platform, and you have even enabled the practice of redlining certain communities. What is your answer? What was your response to HUD? Have you put things in practice to eliminate this?
Well, Congressman, I think at the beginning of the discussion with HUD and some of these groups that I just referenced, we entered into a settlement with the civil rights groups to create a new standard where we block that kind of targeting. And I think it's worth noting that the standard that we set is industry leading. Right? I don't think any of the other internet platforms restrict the kind of targeting that we do for these categories, but I think that doing so helps us uphold the principles around preventing discrimination. So I'm happy and supportive and glad that we're doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Stivers, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you holding this hearing. Mr. Zuckerberg, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
I understand. That was honest. Thank you. First, I want to say I appreciate innovation, and we need innovation in America. No innovation is going to be perfect. And to the questions that the gentleman was just asking, I want to let you maybe clarify a little bit. If I want to advertise housing on Facebook today, can I use age, sex, and zip code to target people today as we sit here?
Congressman, I believe the answer to that is no.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm right on this? All right, just confirmed with my team as well that is
So
fully
that you
implemented.
cannot do that today, and
Yes, those options are no longer in the system for housing, employment, or credit opportunities advertising.
and nobody wants to redline, and I'm sure that was accidental, but I want to talk about Calibra a little bit because I am concerned about the establishment of a private currency which is used for transactions because I think it does undermine other currencies in the world. There's 195 countries, 2 of them are sovereign countries, 2 don't have currencies, so 193 countries that you are opening yourselves up to regulation from. Why not just pick another currency? You can, the Facebook, you're going to make money through the transmission of of whatever it is. It's not about what currency. Why did you think you had to create a private currency? And I guess I would ask you to maybe go back to your folks and think about whether the pain you're going to have in creating a private currency is worth it. But why create a private currency? Why not just pick a currency and use that as part of your payment system?
Sure, thanks, Congressman. The goal of Libra is to build a global payment system rather than a currency. Because it is global in nature, we figured that it might be better to not solely rely on one country's currency. But because we're an American company and because the American economy is the strongest in the world, it makes sense for any reserve to be primarily US dollars and extend America's financial leadership in that way. But like you're saying, we clearly have not locked down exactly how this is going to work yet. I personally am much more focused on being able to help innovate and build a global payment system than I am in any specific makeup of what a currency or reserve might look like. And I think that there's already some discussion about whether it might make sense to build the kind of digital payment system that we're talking about based on individual sovereign currencies rather than a kind of combined or combination of these currencies into some new one. So that's something that's already being considered.
Great, and I think you'll find that the Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering, all those things are going to be really hard with the digital currency, and so ultimately you may find a sovereign country that creates a digital currency that you could then use, or you could do it based on several stable currencies around the world. If you're in Europe, you can pick one, and in the Americas, you can pick one, whatever. But there are a lot of people around the world who need what you're talking about, this cross-border opportunity to efficiently send money back and forth in countries where there's no stable currency. Think about Venezuela for a second. The Venezuelan bolivar is worth nothing, and it's worth less now than it was just a second ago. So there are countries where there is no stable currency, and there are millions of people in the world who are hoping that your innovation works. But I think you may have bitten off more than you can chew by trying to create a private currency. So I would ask you, and I know you're already relooking at it, but I hope you'll think about that because you can make a difference, and frankly, you can have a payment system without creating that private currency. And I think you'll find that the compliance with the individual laws, whether it's anti-money laundering, Bank Secrecy Act, sanctions, all those things will be easier to do existing sovereign currency. So I would just ask you to think about that. You can comment if you want to, but I wanted to use my time to ask you to think about those things.
Congressman, thank you. I think that those discussions, my understanding, are already happening. Some of them are happening publicly. I think that there have been some public comments on this. And I just want to reaffirm what you're saying about how this could be valuable to people around the world. Right? We serve more than 2 billion people around the world. We serve a lot of people in the United States, but there aren't 2 billion people here, so most of the people we serve are in countries that have developing economies that I think could really benefit from this.
Thank you. I yield
Gentleman
back.
from Texas, Mr. Green, who's also the chair. For the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank the ranking member as well. Thank the witness for being here today. Sir, is it true that the Libra Association oversees the Libra project?
Congressman, yes.
And is it true that global corporations make up the association?
Congressman, the association is made of, today, 21 companies and nonprofit organizations as well.
Of the 21, how many are headed by women?
Congressman, I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I can get it for you.
Well, I believe you can get it, Mr. Zuckerberg, but one would assume that you would know who heads these corporations that are going to be running this global company. How many of them are minorities, Mr. Zuckerberg?
Congressman, I do not know off the top of my head.
Are there any members of the LGBTQ plus community associated with this association, Mr. Zuckerberg?
Congressman, I don't know the answer.
Who acknowledge? There are many people who acknowledge that they are a part of the community.
Sorry?
You do not know. Mr. Zuckerberg, is it true that the overwhelming majority of persons associated with this endeavor are white men?
Congressman, I don't know off the top of my head the list of the people who are running the organizations in the association.
Is it true that one would have to have $10 million to become a part, aside from other qualities, to become a part of the association?
Congressman, I believe that was the initial idea, but I don't think that has been locked down yet.
Well, isn't it true that persons have already bought into the association and paid $10 million?
Congressman, I do not believe that has happened yet.
Well, I spoke to your person who manages Libra, and he indicated that he is one of the holders of a post with the association. Is he incorrect?
Congressman, you're right that David Marcus, who runs the Libra subsidiary for Facebook, is Facebook's delegate to this independent association. The question that I was answering is, I don't know if the organizations that are members of the association have yet contributed any financial support for the organization.
Well, I must say that I would assume that you would have the answers, but I would greatly appreciate it if you would share this with me, because I plan to share it with the public. The public needs to know whether this is an organization that is truly diverse or whether it is an organization that is owned and operated by a small group of persons, all of whom have similar characteristics, for want of better terminology. Now, let me share this with you quickly. This does not apply to you, Mr. Zuckerberg, but you need to know why there's a good deal of consternation. There was a man whose name was Bernie Madoff. Mr. Bernie Madoff was the chair of the NASDAQ. He had all of the trappings of being a successful, responsible person. He's now serving 150 years in prison. His Ponzi scheme involved some $64.8 billion. The people who are 4 free markets bought into this Ponzi scheme. They were laissez-faire, but once they lost their money, they made their way to us, and they wanted us to make them whole. This is why we have to be concerned, not because you're a Bernie Madoff. I want the press to clearly understand I'm not saying this, that you are, but because things can happen, things can go wrong, and when they do, we are the people who have to make them right. I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Zuckerberg, welcome to the Financial Services Committee. Criticism is cheap. Anybody can criticize. As you can see here today, politicians in Washington are pretty good at lodging criticism, but creating something of value is significantly more difficult. And I would commend you for being an innovator and trying to create something of value. It seems like in Washington, whenever the private sector produces some type of innovation or new advancement, politicians and bureaucrats rush in to criticize or regulate. In an era when some politicians in Washington and even some politicians on this committee are openly embracing socialism and central planning, it seems like the presumption is always that private sector innovation is a bad thing. I think that presumption should be reversed. We in Congress should view innovation for its potential opportunities in promoting financial inclusion, reducing friction in transactions, aiding small business, and bringing the financial system to unbanked and underbanked communities. That's not to say we shouldn't ask questions, which is, of course, what we're doing here today. But in America, a country built on free enterprise and capitalism, it's always better to be on the side of innovation, and we should always place the burden on the government to justify regulation and intervention. Now, I was very interested in your testimony, Mr. Zuckerberg, when you alluded to the risks of not innovating and the danger of the U.S. falling behind some other countries or foreign companies who are creating similar platforms. Will you elaborate on the initiatives in those other countries?
Yes, Congressman, thanks for the opportunity. Today, as soon as we put out this white paper on Libra, what we saw was, in China especially, they immediately kicked off this public-private partnership with some of their biggest companies in order to race to try to build a system like this quickly, a digital renminbi that they could use as part of their Belt and Road initiative, their kind of foreign and economic policy to grow influence throughout Asia and Africa and other areas. And they're planning on launching this in the next few months.
Well, I would say, when I think AML-BSA issues, it's important when we're talking about Libra and Calibra, but I think the American competitiveness angle and the competition with China is a national security issue, and the fact that Facebook and the Libra Association is launching into innovation, I think, is positive for our national security. Mr. Zuckerberg, I do want to commend you on statements you made recently at Georgetown University about free speech and the First Amendment. I was particularly happy to hear you say that you will, quote, continue to stand for free expression, understanding its messiness, but believing that the long journey towards greater progress requires confronting ideas that challenge us. I'm reminded of what John Stuart Mill wrote on liberty, and I would commend it to my colleagues and my friend, the chairwoman. Mr. Mill wrote that, quote, if all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. And this sentiment is important and relevant to Facebook, especially in today's age of political correctness, accusations of offensive speech, safe places, and the dramatic polarization of our political discourse. I do find it highly troubling that politicians are trying to bully you to be a fact checker and to be the speech police, especially in politics, at the core of the First Amendment. And so along those lines, I want to ask you a question about censorship and whatever fact-checking board you're delegating these responsibilities to. Will you commit that Facebook will not censor any political ad placed on your platform or in support of President Donald Trump?
Congressman, My commitment on this is that, or the principle at least here, is that we believe that people should be able to see for themselves what politicians are saying. That doesn't just go for Trump, that goes for any of the candidates for any of our national offices. People need to be able to see for themselves and be able to make judgments on what the candidates are saying and their character.
Well, I applaud you for that. And I don't want you to be bullied by politicians to relinquish our treasured free speech under the First Amendment. Protect it. And don't be bullied by politicians who want to censor politically incorrect speech. I yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver, who is also the chair for the Subcommittee on National Security, International Development and Monetary Policy, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here today. In response to a letter that I sent to FSOC, I was told that it's unclear whether U.S. and foreign regulators will have the ability to monitor Libra and require any kind of corrective actions. And then at the same time, if U.S. and international regulators are, as they've said in my letter, or the letter to me, unaware if they have the ability to monitor your network and then protect against money laundering and terror financing, how are you going to get over the regulatory hurdles? I mean, if they're already saying that. And what happens if regulators just throw up their hands and say that we cannot guarantee the soundness of this product?
Thank you, Congressman. So there are two parts of the process here. The first is what we and the rest of the association are trying to do to design the system so that it eliminates those risks. And the second is the process of working with the regulator on their concerns and questions to make sure it meets approval. On the former, the key part of this is that the system will be fully backed and one-to-one in the reserve by a mix of cash and highly liquid assets. So that sets it in contrast to the way that most banks work with a fractional reserve, where there could be a run on the bank if a lot of people want to withdraw from that system. Here, everything will be backed one-to-one. So in theory, that shouldn't be possible. Now, in practice, I get that sometimes there are additional risks beyond what the theory says should be possible. So we need to work with the regulator to work through their questions and concerns and make sure that we are operating at the highest level of rigor for financial stability. And that's why my commitment is that we're not going to launch the Libra payment system here or anywhere else around the world until we get the approval from FSOC and the other relevant U.S. financial regulators.
Yeah, I was pleased to hear you say that. Now, there is a mechanism that you've talked about that you wanted to roll out, or I guess you've already begun to do that, which would be some kind of a review mechanism. Can you share that? A review mechanism that would, in some ways, tell you, an independent group would tell you what they believe to be violations of human rights that end up in Facebook and so forth.
Thank you, Congressman. I believe you're talking about the issues around content and hate speech and areas like that. Yes. So this has been an area where our principles, we want to give people as much voice and as wide a definition of freedom of expression as possible. But of course, there are going to be some things that infringe on others' rights or can cause harm. And one of the things that we've struggled with is how do you develop a nuanced set of policies that can identify all of the different types of harms. We've talked about a number today, including terrorism and child exploitation and aspects of hate speech or health misinformation or there's about 20 different categories that we track all in. And we develop policies We now have more than 35,000 people at the company who work on safety and security overall. We spend billions of dollars a year on this. Our budget on safety and security is now greater than the whole revenue of our company was at the time that we went public in 2012. So it's a big effort. But nonetheless, I believe that it should not sit on any one company's shoulders to make so many important decisions about speech. So one of the things that I've tried to focus on doing is building an independent oversight board that will consist of people with diverse backgrounds and views and is global, but who all value freedom of expression. And this group will be able to make final binding decisions on what content stays up and comes down on Facebook that even I or our team won't be able to overrule. So it'll create a check and balance and oversight of our company's operations.
How do you extricate yourself from that, from that body that you would be created?
Congressman, the way we are setting this up is so that we will appoint the first set of co-chairs for the body, and we hope to do this in the next few months. And then they will nominate a set of other members, and we will jointly agree on them. Once the board is up and running, it will nominate and kind of refill itself. So we will not be involved in the selection process after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Tipton, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zuckerberg, a number of my colleagues I'm over here to your left.
There you go.
Okay. But they've expressed some consideration that needs to be taken in regards of the prospective payments industry within the Libra Association. As you're well aware, a number of businesses that have had extensive experience in international payments, MasterCard, Visa, have pulled out of that association. Would you view Facebook as an expert in the payments industry?
Congressman, we're not traditionally primarily a payments company, but the person who's running the Calibra subsidiary for us, David Marcus, was president of PayPal before, which is one of the great payments companies. And we certainly have other financial experts on the management team and board of the company.
You'd also noted in your testimony today that you're going to be looking for U.S. regulatory approval in terms of AML, BSA, to be able to make sure that Facebook, for its part, within the association, will continue to participate. If the Libra
It's Wednesday, October 23rd, 2019. Digital Trends Live is about to start. Here are some of the topics we'll be covering on today's episode as we bring you up to date with everything going on in the world of tech. Mark Zuckerberg is in front of the House Financial Services Committee right now to speak about Libra, but the discussion has been really wide-ranging. We'll cover some of the takeaways, and we've got some great guests on the show today, including John Martin, the CEO and founder of Level Home, who will be talking about their use of invisible technology in smart homes. And our own Drew Prindle will join the show for a segment today where we'll discuss the burgeoning industry of alternative foods, including a fungus-based dairy milk and plant-based eggs. And Elon Musk making the news again because he successfully posted a tweet that went through one of his Starlink satellites. We'll go through their goal of providing space internet to the US and Canada by mid-2020. All that and more coming up on today's episode of Digital Trends Live. There we go. This is Digital Trends Live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. However you're watching, we do appreciate it. And we are live here every single weekday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Of course, a special episode today where we've already been broadcasting some of the Zuckerberg testimony. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. But to tell you a little bit more about Digital Trends Live, we're broadcasting on Periscope, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, Dailymotion, YouTube, Apple News, 2 different smart apps, and a smart television app. And, of course, we're at digitaltrends.com/live. So we're all over the place. Wherever you find us, you can drop in your comments and your questions as we go throughout the show. So definitely do that. I know there's going to be a lot of conversation about what we've been seeing today. But to start off, I'm Greg Nibbler, joined by Luke Larson. Hello, Luke.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. A lot to talk about here to start the show off, and I know, just to let everybody else know, we're going to be having an unboxing, too, here in just a little bit of a new laptop, but
That's why this was a special show.
That's why it's a special show because you're here, Luke. It's always a special show when Luke is here on the show. But let's do this. Let's talk about what's been going on today. So it started off at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Mark Zuckerberg in front of the House Financial Services Committee and discussing everything. It's supposed to be about Libra.
Yeah.
And that was ostensibly what was going to be discussed, about Libra, about the cryptocurrency, and about how they were going to include the U.S. government in regulations. And basically, that's what the goal of this was. But it's been a lot more than that.
Yeah, even just watching little bits and pieces there, you get the random politician with their question about something that has really nothing to do with Facebook, or it has nothing to do with Libra in this case.
Right. I mean, so it is Zuckerberg just by himself right there. He does have a team behind him, but typical, robot sitting there doing his answers. But I got to just walk through some of what has been talked about. So how this has gone so far, in case anybody hasn't been watching it, which I'm sure a lot of people haven't. So we're going to bring you up to date. So, like we said, Libra, Calibra being brought up a lot, which is the crypto wallet that Facebook was talking about. Now, Libra, if you just to give a basic idea of what Libra is, it's essentially their cryptocurrency that they wanted to launch worldwide so that you would be able to send payments via, Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp and many different ways that you'd be able to send payments around. And the goal is to help out a lot of economies where access to banks is not something that everybody has, but they do have access to cell phones. So this would be a way to skip that and give everybody, unilateral access to funds. But they also didn't really work that well with a whole bunch of government entities, and shockingly, governments want to have some say and regulations on what's going on when it comes to currencies being exchanged.
Right.
And that's really what's been going on with this. So this is the U.S. government side of it, where they're like, okay, come here and talk about it. And they started off kind of asking questions about Libra, and then it rapidly went to all over the board, all kinds of things. And this is just so typical of when we have these things where you bring a CEO of a tech company in front of Congress. Some people know what they're talking about, and there's also a lot of Congress people that have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, they don't, especially because this is the Financial Services Committee, right? It's like
right.
It's like these aren't necessarily the people who are the most tech savvy, who know exactly what's going on. They're just like, they're on a certain committee.
Yeah.
And you'd think that's why they would ask more questions about the finances of this and the regulations and whatnot. But instead, they're just going for it. I heard some stuff about the free speech stuff,
right,
where Facebook has sent the whole political ads kind of controversy that got brought up multiple times, I think. So.
It did, yeah. It's kind of expanded into the entire thing that's going on with Facebook right now. We all know there's a lot of issues that are happening. Certainly trust being up. Yeah, the political side of things was brought up. Anytime you have these, it doesn't just stick to the one topic. It's not Libra. It's covering everything that's going on with Facebook. There's a lot of antitrust investigations that are going on right now. I believe every state has joined in, or nearly every state. I don't know if they've all joined in yet, but as far as an antitrust investigation into Facebook. So this is all happening, and he is getting grilled right there. I mean, from the second it started, he was just getting grilled on this, and he knew that was going to happen. And to be honest, it's probably deservedly so. There's a lot of questions that are out there, but it's also hard to decipher exactly what we're going to get out of this, other than it's a bunch of people who are mad and yelling at Mark Zuckerberg. And that's, if you just look at it from the outside, that's what it kind of looks like.
I read something that just said, somebody at one point was like, "Mr. Zuckerberg, are you doing okay?" And he just said, "I'm doing okay." Something like that.
Yeah.
It's a rough morning for Zuck.
Oh, definitely is. A lot of this brought upon himself, and he did say, he did have one quote, just to paraphrase at the beginning, where he was like, "I understand a lot of people probably don't want Facebook leading this." And it's like, yeah, that's I think a lot of the issue. There's security issues, there's privacy issues, there's data issues that have just gone on where, yeah, do you want Facebook leading this cryptocurrency? And I want to know what people think, too. We're broadcasting live. If you have thoughts and opinions on this, let us know what those are. I will say, we'll certainly have a summation of all of this whenever it does complete at digitaltrends.com. We'll keep you up to date for any major announcements. There was at one point somebody went off about anti-vaxxing, who was a strong anti-vaxxer and was mad at Facebook for suppressing the anti-vaccination information. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely on Zuckerberg's side on this one. But yeah, it's just all over the board, and it's just part of this entire push right now against big tech, and we're seeing that happen in a lot of places. And it brings up that wider discussion that we're going to be having for a long time.
Yeah.
How much control do we want big tech as it is to have? I'm talking about the Facebooks, the Amazons, Apples, Googles, those kinds of companies, those specific companies, actually, not even those kinds. How much control do we want them to have over everything?
Yeah, and I think I even read at one point he said something about, going back to what you said about Facebook being involved in this. Like, do we really want Facebook to be, bringing people financial services? And he actually said something like, if the Libra Association, which is some kind of
that's the conglomerate of all the companies that they brought together, which a lot have left.
Yeah, a lot have left, right? But he said if the Libra Association decides to move forward without government approval and regulation, Facebook might step away from Libra as a whole.
I mean, if Facebook stepped away, I don't see it going anywhere anyway.
Right, but he kind of is putting some distance between Facebook and Libra, and kind of saying these are two different entities that could exist. Even apart from each other. So
which is a good move, and it's not something they really did when they started it. I mean, they did say that, no, it's a separate thing, but they really associated their name with it. They were the main PR push for it.
Yeah.
So I think now it's like, this is bad. Okay, yeah, no, remember, we're separate. Yeah, I think there's definitely some dancing that's going on around that too. But that's what we're seeing. This is what's going on with the testimony that's going on right now, and the grilling that's going on of Zuckerberg. So once this all completes, then we'll get a better idea of what is actually going to come out of this. And I don't know if there's a whole lot that's really going to come out.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think it's everybody gets their shot at yelling at Zuckerberg, and he responds and gives their marketing points and talks about their altruistic endeavors to give people the power and all of that. I mean, it's really a phenomenal show. I will say that it's a great show.
It's really it's always interesting when tech goes to Washington. So
it's interesting. And definitely some interesting theories coming through on our platforms. So let us know what those theories are. We like to see all of them. All right, a couple other things that we need to bring you up to date with, though, when it comes to news, some trending tech news. Google is in the news right now talking about quantum computing.
Yeah.
Luke, I'm glad you were on the show today. What's quantum computing?
Oh, I'm a quantum computing expert. Lucky you.
So this is something that Google has claimed that they, and this was actually rumored about a month ago. We started seeing rumors come out where Google had claimed that they, or it was a leak, that they had actually completed a quantum computation with a quantum computer, and specifically it was something that, so their codenamed computer is a 53-bit quantum computer named Sycamore, and Sycamore, they claimed it took 200 seconds to perform a calculation that would have taken the world's fastest supercomputer 10,000 years.
Yeah.
10,000 years to 200 seconds.
Yeah.
Pretty big leap.
And that's what they call quantum supremacy, which is the idea that because for a long time these quantum computers were just kind of theoretical. Mm-hmm. We knew that they could do stuff that normal computers really couldn't do, but we didn't have any proof of that. No one had ever actually done anything. So quantum supremacy really just means a quantum computer doing something that a traditional computer could never do, or would take it in an insane amount of time to do. So that's why they're saying they've achieved quantum supremacy,
because they've been able to do this.
They actually did something that a normal computer couldn't do.
Well, and Sundar Pichai actually came out and said, he actually talked about it because they submitted this paper for peer review at MIT. So now it's official. That's why it's news today, is that they've officially released it. Like, okay, everybody knows, here's what we did. There's certainly been some backlash. IBM, also very much into quantum computing, is disputing it. They're saying not so fast. We want to take a look at this and see if they actually did it, which is why it's probably going to MIT, which is where we're going to get some review on that. But Sundar compared it to the first flight by the Wright brothers, saying that, flight now is clearly nothing like it was back then, but even though it was only 14 seconds, we achieved flight for that time, and then we expanded from there. And I think that's one of the big things when it comes to quantum computing, is that even if they did this, we're in such the infancy of that whole kind of computing and what it could do. There was another one, we actually had an interview with the IBM VP of quantum computing a couple years ago, And he compared it as far as computing, saying this isn't the 1970s or the 1980s. This is the 1940s compared to modern computing. So we're at the very, very early stages of where this could go. But if we do achieve it, I mean, there's innumerable possibilities of what we could do with this.
Yeah, and this isn't something that's like, oh, I'm going to have a quantum computer in my house someday. This is the idea that these quantum computers could be running the world's systems and doing things that we just can't imagine really being possible. I pulled up the IBM quote, and who is disputing the real whether or not this is actually quantum supremacy. And they said that an ideal simulation of the tasks that it completed would actually only take 2.5 days. So they're saying that Google kind of stretched the
from 2.5 days to 10,000.
Yeah, like saying what the actual task wasn't actually as difficult as they're saying. So they're saying that that's a kind of a worst case estimate for what they were doing with the 10,000. Yeah. So
So a little bit of a stretch on that. I
Yeah.
mean, still impressive.
It's still impressive.
You know,
2.5 days in 200 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if once we're able to actually master this, I mean, you could run everything off of it. And like you said, it's hard to even imagine the possibilities because you think about the 1940s, what people would have thought computers could do now. I mean, think about a cell phone. You know, it's that kind of stretch of technology that we're talking about of where we could go with something like this. You can't even really, contemplate it. And same thing with the Wright brothers with, their flight of 14 seconds to where we are now.
Yeah.
It's just a massive technological leap that could happen with this. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight, even if Google proves this. But it is something that we're, I guess if we're seeing this part of it right now, that means we are on the precipice of, seeing more and more of this.
Yeah, and the fact that all the big companies are basically in on this. You know,
Yeah.
Microsoft, and Google, and they're all going for this, and they're all interested in it. So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's going somewhere. And it's even good. I think that IBM is pushing back, and there's a little bit of self-correction in the industry. So it's all good stuff. It's good to see.
All right, I know we need to get through a couple more stories here really quick, so we're just kind of going to rapidly go through some, and then we're going to have an unboxing here in a minute. But another trending story has to do with CEOs of major companies, and I'm bringing this up for a couple of reasons, because it's important to remember that CEOs really do have a lot of power when you talk about where you're driving companies. And there was a big day yesterday with Nike's CEO, which has had a lot of success in sales on going online and utilizing apps. So there's a tech angle to that too. A step down, just to keep track of this, Nike CEO Mark Parker stepped down to be replaced by the CEO of a company called ServiceNow. So ServiceNow's CEO, John Donahoe, is now going to be CEO of Nike. So that's one move. Then you have also in the shoe industry. So there we go. There's John Donahoe. You have Under Armour's CEO, who also stepped down, which is kind of a crazy thing when you think about two big rivals like Under Armour and Nike.
Yeah.
Both of their CEOs stepped down on the same day. And Under Armour's CEO has stepped down, and it's going to be replaced by the CTO, I believe, or the COO. I'm taking a look here, just trying to keep track of it all myself. But then the other big CEO move is you have Boeing's CEO, who also stepped down. Now, that one is under a little bit more of controversy, because that's somebody who, because of everything that's gone on with the 737 MAX, that's where we're seeing a lot of that. That's why we're seeing him step down. So it's trending news as far as all these CEOs that are coming down in one day.
Something in the water.
Something's in the water. Yeah, changes are afoot. So that's one trending story. And the other thing I wanted to bring up too has to do with foldable devices. Yes, they're still a thing. And Huawei finally has theirs out, or at least a date when you could get it if you're in China. So the Huawei Mate X was their competition, their competing phone for the Samsung Galaxy Fold. It's same thing with the Fold. There were a bunch of issues that just delayed it to where finally now it is out, and or it will be out on November 15th to where you can get it. They went up in price a little bit. Instead of the $2,000 for the Samsung Galaxy Fold, it's $2,400.
Yikes.
For a phone.
I will say, I've always thought that this design was the one. Like this is
the one. The Huawei
I've
one?
always liked this one over the Galaxy Fold because it has it flips the other way basically, and you have it feels a little less weird having that front screen, and then which is always kind of weirdly small in the Galaxy Fold, and then how it opens up like that. So I do like the design of this.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to see more and more. That's kind of part of the news too. Is all of these different companies are coming out with their own foldable devices. So we'll see more of this. But the Huawei one,
We'll probably never see that one.
Probably won't see that one. That's true. Yeah, probably won't. All right, I know we need to get to a break because we have an unboxing. Luke is going to unbox. What are you unboxing?
It's a secret.
That's a
Can't tell
secret. We don't know. You have to watch to find out. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to reset here for a second. Drop in your comments, your questions, whatever you want to bring up. We'll be back here in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. Welcome back to Digital Trends Live, continuing our coverage of everything that's going on in technology. But now it is time for an unboxing. I'm Greg Nibbler, joined by Luke Larson. Luke, what is in your mystery box?
I've got him. Just call me J.J. Abrams. I've got something from Razer here, a special package. I'm going to get rid of this.
Okay, just throw it on the ground. This is what we do. And thank you everybody who's joining us too. Drop in your comments as we go through. So
now, yeah, so we've done a lot of Razer Blade reviews.
Yes.
It's their kind of popular 15-inch gaming laptop. But they recently announced something, a new version of that, which has a one really cool feature. Basically, it's exactly the same except has one very cool feature.
Okay, and as we're walking through this, so this is how when you get a review, this is how it shows up. It shows up in this box. You've never seen this before.
Yep, never seen it before.
So, yep, we just throw everything back there. Never show the floors in this studio. Like, nobody needs to see what's going on.
Interns take care of that, right?
That's right. We have interns.
So here's the box. Razer always has awesome.
They do. Yeah, the packaging. I always like to see how they package them.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to pay, it's a good amount of money, I'm sure, for these laptops.
Oh, these are very expensive.
Yeah, you want a good presentation. That's important.
Yeah, so they always have the nice kind of magnetic thing there.
Oh, that is a fancy box.
Yeah, it's a fancy box. You don't need to see that. This is just the charger, which we don't need at this point because the real feature here, I'll just get to it.
Okay.
Is the keyboard.
Ooh.
So they've done something new with keyboards, and basically, it's the idea that as gaming laptops have gotten thinner and lighter, sorry about that. As they've gotten thinner and lighter, which is great.
Yeah.
One of the things that they've kind of lost along the way is the keyboard. They keep getting shallower and shallower, kind of like a normal keyboard, but gamers love their
right. You want that tactile feedback.
Yes.
The feeling that you're crunching down on a button during it.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen more and more gaming laptops come out. This is really over the last year, I would say.
Yes.
We've seen a lot more come out, and Razer's always had theirs. But always with still love their logo. It's a good logo.
It's a nice logo.
So this is nice, a nice looking computer.
This is a nice looking computer. Okay, and I've seen the keyboard, and it actually doesn't look any different. It's entirely the feel. Okay. So what they call it is an optical keyboard.
Okay.
So there's a shot of that. I mean, it's the Razer Blade. It looks like the Razer Blade. The keyboard doesn't look any different. And what's cool is it's not any thicker than normal, even though it does have a longer key travel distance. So I got to get my hands on this. I haven't actually tried what this feels like.
Okay, so we're just gonna watch Luke type there for a minute.
You probably can't hear it, but it does have.
It does have that sound of the clicking. Now, so that's something for gamers, and I want to know for people out there, because compared to just a thin, and this isn't calling out the brands or anything, but a really thin keyboard like this, I would imagine, for gaming, and this is not a gaming laptop that I have, Yeah, it just doesn't have quite that same thing. So that's something
Right.
that gamers definitely want.
So
Does that feel?
a keyboard like a normal keyboard, like we have the same, we just happen to
Right,
have the
we
same
do, yeah.
laptop. These are like 1.3 millimeter travel. So
Okay.
that's the distance between the press of the key there. What this has is a 1.7 millimeter travel. You gotta tap on this.
Being asked just to clarify,
Oh, sure.
what's an optical keyboard?
Okay, let me get through.
That's a very good question, actually. Thank you, Julie.
So basically, instead of the mechanical parts of a mechanical keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
it uses an optical light sensor.
Okay.
For all of its switches. So it uses that to actually produce the experience of a more tactile mechanical keyboard.
Okay. All right. So it's just artificially. creating
Yes,
that
yes, and I mean there is a deeper travel, but they also use this optical light sensor to make that work, and they've used this in their other actual mechanical keyboards. What do you think?
Yeah. No,
felt
I can feel it. Yeah, it's definitely got some more feedback to it.
Yeah. So I wish I had the other one, the standard one next to me, but the difference here really is nice. Like it really feels substantial in terms of it's more similar to an actual gaming keyboard that you would have. And like I said, they use the same technology it's called the Huntsman keyboard that they have. And they use the same optical, but they had to make it obviously much thinner to fit it into the frame of this laptop. So
A couple other key things I'm seeing, speakers on the sides. Looks like some pretty sizable speakers, actually.
Yeah. Some of the things that Razer's always been good at, I mean, other than just like the nice minimal design, they got speakers on top. The display itself is a 1080p display, but it has a 240 hertz refresh rate.
Wow.
It's basically as high as they get these days.
Yeah.
So you probably higher than you really need.
I was going to say 240 hertz. That's
yeah. If you're running games at 240 frames per second, you're sitting pretty good. So yeah.
And you can do that successfully on this laptop?
I mean, I think that's
Until you
for an
have
extreme
tested it,
case.
sure,
For the 240 hertz is like if you're playing, Counter-Strike or something, and you lower all your settings down, and you want the absolute fastest response and the quickest feeling of the game, and you want that. That's for really for big competitors,
right?
In esports and stuff like that. But I think it's as powerful a gaming laptop as you can get. It has an RTX 2080 in it. So it's top of the line display, and now it has this unique feature that it has this optical keyboard, and it's really unlike any gaming laptop out there.
Yeah.
There's none that I can think of that have anything that have this feel. Man, I really like that. I'm into it.
Luke is
I'm
enjoying
really into it.
This is going to be some ASMR video at some point. I know I'm just you typing. But with this, so something like this, what is the price range on this?
So this is only available, I believe this is only available on the high-end models. So they have a 4K version that is as an OLED screen, it's 4K. Okay. That's really more of a content creation device. I'm trying to see what the actual
The
price
bottom line
is for it's a very expensive computer for sure. I just want to be able to get the price on it with the optical sensor.
George, just a quick question. I know we need to go
Sure.
to a break here pretty quick, but George asks, are gamers using Bluetooth headphones, or is the latency still too much?
Oh, gamers use Bluetooth headphones for sure. Yeah,
So still okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And probably something like this. I'm sure could.
Yeah. So price-wise, talking $3,000 for
$3,000.
The 2080, the 240 hertz.
Copy over on that side.
9th gen processor, and I believe this is the one with the optical. So yeah. So it's an expensive laptop, but obviously you're getting something that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And I love the addition of this keyboard. I think it's just really cool. Of course, it has all the RGB lighting that you'd expect.
Yeah.
If it was on, you would see that.
Right.
But it's an awesome little like trick to throw in.
So from here, you take this to the lab and then just start playing games?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I love how I've simplified your job.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, he just plays games
or
something. I don't
that's
know.
how I play games. That's what people say when they walk. Oh, working hard, huh? Yeah.
No, but that's great. So we'll get to see some more of what this is once you get your review done.
Yep. We'll get to see more of that, and I kind of want to see how it feels next to an actual gaming keyboard and see kind of what the difference is, and then also against the older one that doesn't have the optical keyboard. So.
There it is, just for the sound for posterity's sake. All right, well, Luke, thank you very much for joining us, and not only for the opener, but also for this, the unboxing. That's part of the fun here of Digital Trends. We never know. I had no idea what he was bringing in, so boom, there it is, a surprise. And that's what we get to do. So we have lots coming up, though. We have more interviews. We have more news. Drew Prindle's going to be in here in a little bit, and I think he's got plant-based eggs, from what I understand. He sent me a message right before we went on air. I don't even know. We're just going to go through this, and we're going to have fun with it. So coming up next, though, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to have John Martin, who's the CEO and founder of Level Home, talking about invisible technology in smart homes and what that means. So we'll walk through all of that. If you have questions, comments, whatever they are, drop them on whatever platform you're watching on. We'll be back here in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. And welcome back to Digital Trends Live. We broadcast live here every weekday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. So hit that subscribe button. That way you get the notifications when we do go live. Continuing on with our coverage today, we're going to talk about smart homes. I'm Greg Nibbler, and our next guest is John Martin, who is the CEO and founder of Level Home. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it.
I love talking about smart home technology. It's something that certainly a lot of people are interested in, and it's changing rapidly. To give everybody on the same page, can we get a little bit of a background of your company in particular?
Yeah, so Level Home, we've been working stealth for the last 3 years. We've just come out to the world to share with everybody the work we've been doing. The company's founded on a very basic principle, which is that product makers for the last few years in the connected home have sort of been making products that deliver a bit of a wedge between the early adopter in the home and the everyday user in the home. We wanted to make products, hardware products specifically for the connected home, that brought those two groups together, that created a balance, which is what Level Home stands for, a balance between the technology that, as technology creators, we want to bring into the home, and the everyday life of the consumers who live in the home. So that was sort of the construct. We thought the smart lock was the right place to start because we saw a pretty significant imbalance there between what the everyday consumers were wanting and what was being brought to market at this time.
So that's a great description, talking about the early adopters versus everyday users now, because smart home products are more prevalent clearly than they ever have been. But connecting all of them and working on that back-end hardware and how do you connect everything together, that's certainly something that a lot of people don't have a lot of knowledge in. So this is a great subject to talk about. Can you walk through, with this particular product that you brought up that you're launching, can you talk through what that is and how that would play a role in a modern smart home?
Yeah, so fundamentally what we wanted to do when we looked at this smart lock space specifically was we thought there was a lot of smart, but not a lot of home in it. We went out and realized that really what consumers wanted was the ability to use their existing lock that they have. The Level lock that we created, what we love about it is it allows you to use your existing deadbolt that you have on your door, and we invisibly install inside the gap that's inside the door to make that smart. So you might have a 1998 home that you bought, was built in 1998, and has an existing deadbolt on it. We can make that 2020 in 5 minutes with the user installing our lock inside the space that's inside the door. This is what is really interesting to consumers because we don't take away the design of their home. We don't ask you to sacrifice whatever the expression is that identifies you and your home to make it smart. And this is what we think sort of the direction needs to go in the connected home, is this concept that we call invisibility is something that as product makers is a higher order for us to step up to. And that's what we're hoping we can lead a trend on with this first generation of products we have.
I love that concept, you know, to maintain that integrity, because like you said, if you buy a home, there's certain looks that you like, you enjoy, and you don't necessarily need to see a giant glaring piece of tech that's you know, as part of it. That's certainly something.
Yeah, remember, we're trying to, you know, the early adopter might not mind a tech statement on their front door, but perhaps the people who live in the home, say the spouse or the others in the home, don't necessarily want to lose the design and the heritage of something that they own. We have a field trial we've been in for the last year. We have a heritage home that's out, 1842 was built. It's out in Cape Cod. Beautiful home. It's got a gigantic ancient wooden door on it. It was constructed originally. We installed in there. We made that home smart without sacrificing the integrity of the design of it, the expression. And that's really unique. That's what really we need to as product makers. If we're going to bring technology in, we need to do it in a way that really preserves the heritage of the expression of the home, and not think that our job is to make everybody's homes feel technical.
Can we walk through the product just a little bit more? Now, you mentioned that somebody could, in theory, do it in 5 minutes, retrofit it. How exactly do you do that with the same key?
Very simple. You go up to your door, you remove the bezels that you have for your deadbolt. You take the bolt out. You put our bolt and our motor can inside the door, and then you put your bezels back on.
Just that easy.
Now what you've done is you put sort of a genius little device in the middle of the interactions that are existing on your existing lock. So your in-laws don't have to get a new key. Nobody has to learn anything, but now it's invisibly smart. And this is as simple as it works. And that's what we set out to do, is really remove these barriers, make something simple to do. You can do that with a single number 2 Phillips screwdriver. That's all you need. A very common tool in most anybody's garage. A simple, short home improvement project for most consumers.
Something else that I want to make note too, that I'm taking a look at as far as the product that it also works with. Clearly you have the app, you'd be able to open and unlock things remotely, I'm sure, but also you're facilitating the in-home delivery service from Walmart. Can you walk through what that's like?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. When we're beginning this process for a while now, but when you go and extend beyond the consumer, just the residents in the home, and you start to ask companies who want to have relationships with consumers, what's barriers there, right? Well, what I see happening today, and this is where Walmart's really going to pioneer, is a lot of us, this 5-mile radius around our home that we used to drive to get services, groceries, dry cleaning, and whatnot, these things are all piling up on the front porches of American homes today. When we go and talk to service providers like Walmart, what we see is they don't want to be in the smart lock business. They want to deliver service. What we do with the product that we have, and why Walmart wanted to be so close with us, so as to invest and then use us as their primary smart lock for their in-home delivery service, was the fact that nothing needs to change in the home in order for deliveries to come to your home. In this case, what happens with Walmart is a Walmart person, once you sign up for the service, comes out, they install the level lock invisibly inside your door. Nothing has to change with the interactions. Your key still works. Everybody can still come and go. But the difference now is the delivery person now can have high quality secured access to your home to deliver the service. And this is where service provider after service provider that we've been meeting with have sort of fallen in love with this concept of level lock, because it allows them to do what they're really good at, which is service, not to try to get into the smart lock business, which is where it gets confused.
Seeing a question that just came through from George talking about standard locks, and usually the longevity is years and years. What's the expected longevity of the level lock?
That's a great question. So the level lock is an ANSI grade 1 lock, or A is the new gradation it's called. That's the highest level of security. That means we pass 250,000 cycle tests. Our lifetime is many times more than any lock on the market. And this is actually a design principle with the product from the start. This is a product that has to win trust, right? We all want to move everybody to these modern concepts of sending an e-bite out to a party to 50 people that has access to your home. But fundamentally, a smart lock first has to be a great lock. So the level lock is an ANSI grade 1 lock. We validated it well over 1 million cycles. The tail pieces from the manufacturers that we integrate with bust before we do. So you shouldn't expect to see us be something that would ever be in your way of entry and exit. And it's the highest level of quality. It's a completely steel housing, steel gear train. This was part of the ethos fundamentally, and why we've taken the last 3 years to engineer this from the ground up, was to ensure that trust was something that we could achieve. It's why we achieved ANSI grade 1 certification on the lock.
Well, it's a really, really cool product, and I love this idea of invisible smart home technology. I can certainly see that taking off. Just one final question. Do you have plans for other products along this line?
Yeah, we have a 5-year roadmap right now. We have a couple others in the pipeline. Obviously, I can't share that with you right now, but you'll see those coming. We have a few that are stacked up that'll be coming in progression through this time period. This is actually the lock here, just so you guys can see. That's an actual level lock right there.
Wow, yeah, definitely simple, sleek, looks exactly like a normal lock. I love this idea of it, the concept. So where is it available now, and where can people find out more information about it?
You can sign up for our reserve program on level.co. It'll be open to the public for order in January. You can get it through Walmart's in-home delivery service today. And we'll be in other retail outlets starting in January. So right now, come to our site. We also have on level.co a special going right now. We retail for $249 for the level lock. We're offering it right now under the reserve program for $199.
Nice. Well, John, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Always fascinating learning about new technology, and certainly with your company coming out of stealth mode, we love having you on here to talk about this, and looking forward to talking to you in the future as well.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks.
Great.
All right, learning about new technology right here on Digital Trends, and that's really fun. I love that idea of making something invisible, so it blends in with what you already have. That's a great concept. I'm sure we'll see more of that in the future, and let's do this. We're going to take a break. We've got a lot more coming up here on Digital Trends Live. Up next, I believe we have some plant-based eggs that are going to be in here, and we're going to be talking about alternative foods. There's a lot of news about that. We cover a lot of it at Digital Trends. We have Drew Prindle, who's going to be coming in here in studio to discuss that. So drop in your comments, your questions, whatever you want to bring up on whatever platform you're on. We'll be back here in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. Welcome back to Digital Trends Live. Thank you for joining us. Drop in your comments, your questions, whatever you want to bring up as we go throughout the show. A lot of tech to cover today. I'm Greg Nibbler, joined now by Drew Prindle, also breakfast apparently.
Yeah, joined by breakfast.
Joined by breakfast, right here on the show. Drew, all right, I want to walk through what we have here. There's so much to cover when it comes to different kinds of alternative foods that we've covered here at Digital Trends. But, I mean, I think we have to start off with what's sitting here right
Exactly, man. I figured we'd start off with a taste test. So
Good.
Yeah, so this is something that apparently has been out for a while. I didn't realize it though. It's kind of been slowly making its way across like the U.S. You can find it in some stores now, maybe not in like every city, but I found out that it was in Portland, so I went and got some. It's just egg. It's like this weird plant-based egg goop that cooks up.
You make it sound so appetizing.
I mean, it doesn't look great. I mean, it looks like scrambled eggs, like runny eggs when it comes out of the bottle.
Is this what? So this is what it comes out of? You
Yeah.
Just, like,
you just
scoop
pour it
out,
into a thing.
pour it
It's
out?
like pre-mixed eggs, and then you pour it into the pan, and it cooks up exactly like it ends up. The texture is pretty much exactly the same.
I mean, if I didn't know looking at it, I wouldn't think, okay, that's a weird plant-based goop. It does look like eggs.
It looks convincingly real in
Yeah.
terms of like color and shape.
And this is, again, you make it sound so appetizing. But this is something we're seeing more and more of. All of these different plant-based foods.
Yeah.
I know we've got some other ones we'll talk about, but the eggs, I don't feel like that's something that's been as prevalent. But clearly, you
No.
said it's been
I mean,
available before.
I
guess
think-
there is like some kind of things I guess that we've had before, but this is
Sort
definitely
of.
unique.
There have been like vegan substitutes for all kinds of like animal foods for the longest time, but they're getting better and better. And the ones that are getting all of the spotlight right now are all the meats.
Yeah.
Because it's like we're making all of this headway in making like hamburgers. So you see Beyond and Impossible popping up in like fast food restaurants. But there's also kind of this like other revolution happening in other types of animal food. So you're seeing like seafood getting made, you're seeing eggs, cheese, dairy, yogurt, stuff like that. So this is one of the first ones that you can really get your hand on.
So one of the big things for me when it comes to this stuff, and I've tried the Impossible Burger. I mean, that won our best tech of CES. Beyond Meat they're everywhere, but it's the taste. The taste aspect is the key. Like Impossible Burger, it tastes like a decent burger. It's not like the greatest burger you've ever had, but it's
close enough to hamburger.
Yeah,
right?
close enough. So have you tried these eggs?
Yeah, I actually tried up a test batch last night. I don't want to ruin the surprise though, so I want to get your genuine reaction.
Okay.
Grab yourself a fork.
All right, I'm gonna test this right now. These are plant-based. The thing is, the way you set it up beforehand, now I'm just thinking.
Plant-based egg goop.
Yeah, okay, that's not eggs. Yeah.
It's definitely not eggs, right?
That's not eggs.
Okay, so
but
the flavor, it's like they went too hard on the fake butter flavor.
Yeah.
To mask the fact that it's like soy.
In a pinch, I guess. Yeah,
Okay.
if it were mixed in with a bunch of stuff.
So that's exactly the thing, right? They got the texture right.
Yeah.
But
the
the flavor's
there,
the flavor's
but the
off.
flavor is not.
Which is why I made stuff with other flavors in it.
You made
for to try. I
burritos.
made breakfast burritos. These are also completely plant-based. There's fake chorizo in here.
All right, so the entire thing is fake. Okay.
Yes.
So fake chorizo, fake eggs.
And fake cheese.
And fake cheese.
Yes.
So everything is fake in this.
Everything's fake in this. Dig in.
Questions coming through. How much protein is in there versus real eggs? So let's talk about the nutritional side of it.
Nutritional content. Let's check it out right now. Protein, 5 grams per 3 tablespoons. There are 8 servings in here.
I'm going to say it's got a real aftertaste to it.
Yeah.
There is definitely, I'm going to be tasting that for a while. And it tastes like stems. But
Stems?
That's what it tastes like.
Stems of what?
I don't know. Broccoli or something. It tastes like
This
stems.
tastes nothing like broccoli
That's
stems.
what
You're out of your mind.
That's what I'm getting from it. But, all right, so let's eat a burrito. If we can get a close-up of this would be great for my reel. All right.
Any better?
It's a little bit better.
Do you still taste the weird egg flavor? I actually haven't tried this
I
yet.
can't get it out of my mind now. But
Okay, yeah.
I will say, that's not bad. That's actually not that bad. Mixed all up like that. I mean, there still is definitely a plant taste to it. You still definitely have that, but it's certainly a lot closer.
The chorizo masks a lot of the flavor.
Chorizo does mask a lot of it. So this is the trend that we're seeing here and all of this. This one not so sure about. But still, sorry, Just. But as we're seeing this, we've been covering a lot of the different alternative foods on our site. And there's certainly a lot of benefits, I guess, nutritionally. That's kind of up in the air as far as that side of it.
They're still
'Cause I know
working
the
on it.
Impossible Burger is not that much better for you than a standard burger.
Absolutely not. It's got way more fake stuff in it.
Right.
Processed nonsense.
But environmentally, it's a huge difference.
because we're not using animal agriculture, so we don't have to, use all of the land. The cows aren't farting and spouting methane into the atmosphere and all of that stuff that happens.
Right, which is a huge
We're
thing.
cutting that out of the equation, which is really good for the environment.
So this is something that we're covering. What else do we have that's up right now that we're talking about?
So we published a couple articles earlier this week that were pretty cool. Dunkin' Donuts, now you can get fake sausage in your breakfast patty now
Yeah.
at Dunkin' Donuts. It's the Beyond Sausage.
See, now that's something that I think, like, if it's close enough, I'm totally good with that.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's also, I think it's because like hamburger and sausage are kind of like the easiest meats to recreate, right? Because it's just ground up. You don't have to like nail the texture.
You don't
very
want to
much.
think too much about what's actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like the flavorings, you just pump it full of like fake maple flavor and smoke flavor, and like
Right.
it passes. Like sausage
Good
is
enough.
already just like a mishmash of crap anyway, so it's pretty easy to recreate with plants.
Yeah, and so we're seeing that. I mean, and you're seeing all of these fast food companies, really getting into this.
Yeah, which is it's crazy.
Dunkin' Donuts. I mean,
It's
that's
crazy how popular this stuff has become. I never thought it was going to take off in a million years like this ferociously, but it totally has. There are like lines around the block. Apparently, Beyond, when they launched this sausage product, it was in Manhattan before it was anywhere else. It was by far the most popular thing on their menu.
Which is huge. I mean, think now that you see fast food companies adopting this and bringing that in, I mean, that's really where it changes everything, because once it's a viable option for everybody to try, why not? And if it tastes the same, that is also the key to me.
Yeah, I think that's the key for everybody. That's
it's got to taste the same. I mean, if you're already a vegan, then I guess you're not really going to know the difference anyway. So it's not going to be that big of a thing.
True.
And I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a vegan, but I have no problem with vegan foods. It's just as long as the taste is there.
Yeah.
That I want.
And that's that gap that we're closing right now.
Right.
And we're getting closer and closer, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
There's another story that we wrote. It's kind of more researchy. We're probably not going to see this out in like stores anytime soon, but these scientists figured out a way to give realistic like meat texture to plant-based stuff. So they could make like, theoretically, you could make like a steak that has like realistic grain in it.
Mm-hmm. So then, and texture is really one of the big things.
Oh yeah, especially for things, as we move beyond just like hamburger and sausage, like texture is going to become more and more like of a big deal, right?
Right.
Especially with steak. I think that's kind of like the holy grail for plant-based foods.
And we've seen a lot of that, some of them where you 3D print it.
Yeah, and they're using like weird pea proteins and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I'm sure they're gross. Like there's no way that is even remotely close to what a real steak is like.
Yeah, that's one of the huge things. It's got to be that. It's got to be that texture. It's got to be that flavor.
Yeah, so they
Once you
figured
get it.
They figured out this way to basically take like gelatin and spin it in basically a cotton candy machine, and it would make these little like fibers, and then they could use that to like culture the meat on, like lab-grown meat.
Wow.
And that gives it a realistic like structure and texture when you cook it.
That's crazy. Well, I mean, we'll see where all of this goes. Thank you for the burrito. Thank you very much for making these. I appreciate
You're
it.
very welcome.
And appreciate learning about all of this. And we've got articles up at Digital Trends on all kinds of different alternative foods and different sources and different ways that this is changing, and it's changing so fast. We're seeing it, like we said, in all the fast food restaurants are starting to adopt it. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts now, that's big.
Yeah, that's huge.
If you can convince a Dunkin' Donut breakfast sandwich eater to go with that, then I think that's success. That's a win right there. Well, you can read, like I said, more about this at Digital Trends. Drew, thank you as always. Always fascinating when Drew comes in because we never know what we're going to cover. And this time we ate burritos. So here's what's coming up next. We have a lot of coverage left of tech. We've got some more news coming up, but we're going to take a break, and then we're going to have Benjamin O'Leary from Blue Jay Legal and talking about the use of artificial intelligence in the legal systems and how we can use that to better things for everybody, how it's being applied. Fascinating discussion. So we're going to be having that here in a minute. Drop in your comments, your questions, whatever you want to bring up on whatever platform you're on, and we'll be back in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. This is Digital Trends Live. Thank you for being here with us. We broadcast live every single day, so hit that subscribe button, share the show, let everybody know about it. A lot of different topics that we cover, and artificial intelligence has certainly been something that we talk about a lot and how it's being applied in different areas. And I'm Greg Nibbler. I want to welcome our guests now to talk about artificial intelligence in a really unique way it's being applied. We have Benjamin O'Leary from Blue Jay Legal, the founder and CEO. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Artificial intelligence, like I was saying, is something that we're seeing, at least that term, thrown out a lot in different ways that we're finding out how we can use it to apply to different kinds of tech or different services. And this, the legal system, certainly one that I'm very fascinated with. And I wanted to see if you could just walk us through from the beginning, just a little bit about the company, and then we'll get into the technology itself.
Sure. So Blue Jay Legal is an offshoot of really academic research that we've been doing at the University of Toronto for several years now. And what we're doing is we're basically taking large databases of past cases and training our algorithms to identify patterns in how judges are making decisions in existing cases, and then creating a front end that allows accountants, lawyers, judges, those involved in tax administration to research the validity of new cases using these algorithms. And so the algorithms can make predictions about what a court is likely to do in the next case with 90% or better accuracy. So it's very exciting, very accurate, and incredibly useful for the legal system.
Wow, that is that's fascinating. Just taking a look at that, because the tax legal system and tax law is so complex. I mean, just doing your taxes is complex enough, let alone these very complex questions and different things that come up when associated with that. So you gathered all these different cases, and then you feed this into your system, into the algorithm, and then that is where it applies it to. So can we walk through a little bit of that process, what it was like gathering all of that?
Yeah, so this has been a multi-year effort to figure out exactly how best to present case-based information to algorithms so that the algorithms can really figure out what's driving how judges are exercising their discretion in these tricky questions. And you're absolutely right. Tax law is very complex. A lot's riding on the tax system. The IRS collected $3.5 trillion worth of tax last year in 2018. And so we're talking about big, complex systems of law and lots of rulings, thousands of rulings, and lots of money at stake. So what we can do is we collect all of the rulings, all of the judgments, put them into a format that is readily understandable by the algorithms or analyzable by the algorithms. The algorithms are identifying patterns in different taxpayer situations that are leading judges to conclude one way or the other way in a variety of different contexts that pertain to taxation. So it's really challenging to figure this out, and it's been a multi-year effort, as I mentioned, to figure this out. But we're really excited by the progress that we're making, and it's extremely interesting to a variety of players in tax law and beyond tax and employment law and in other areas as well.
What are the use cases right now? So you mentioned, there's an accountant out there, somebody who has a complex legal question. How would they go about utilizing this?
Right. So how our users are using it is basically they're typically accountants at large accounting firms or lawyers at large law firms. They're logging in, they're selecting a particular issue that they want to analyze using our system. They log in, they start filling out information related to the taxpayer situation that they're trying to get clarity on. And they'll enter a bunch of information into the system. They'll get through, a couple dozen different kinds of factual questions. And depending on the area, there may be more or less information that they have to enter into the system. They'll finally end up at a compute button. And when they click compute, it'll basically compare the facts of that case to all the existing cases, and it'll provide an explanation about why that's the outcome that the system is predicting. And that's the equivalent of something like an A or A+ exam answer. I'm also a law professor, as I mentioned, at the University of Toronto. And so I'm familiar with what makes for a really strong exam answer. And so this new technology presents the prospect of having machines help us do legal research in a way that really is game changing.
So this would be something that, you mentioned that you have the data is compiled from all kinds of different cases and judge rulings along those lines. Is this something that somebody could take and then submit as well, here's what this says. There's a 95% chance that I'm right, so let's, say it's a potential lawsuit or something, settle that out of court, or a taxation issue. Is this something that you could present as actual evidence? And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm probably using the wrong terminology. I am not a legal professor, but I'm sure you can make this a little bit easier to understand for me. But is this something that could be used in the legal system currently?
Greg, you're absolutely right, and your terminology is fantastic. Basically, folks are using this already to help resolve disputes, and so you can imagine it's very useful if you are looking to settle a dispute to be able to present an independent, objective report on the strength of your case to the opposing side and say, look, let's settle this. It looks like we have a very strong chance of prevailing. If push were to come to shove here, let's save ourselves the hassle of having to go to court and go through that legal battle. We can settle now on really mutually advantageous terms compared to what we'd realize if we were to go to court. And so what it is doing is it's helping to resolve disputes more quickly, more efficaciously, and saving the court's time for cases that are likely to be closer to the borderline. And so more challenging disputes where we really need judges to weigh in on how those disputes should be addressed. So if there's an existing answer in the case law, our system will help those parties to negotiate to a mutually fair resolution.
Wow, that is fascinating, just to think about how that could be utilized and save everybody time, and just to go through this and be like, well, here's what all of these results say. You mentioned this being applied, potentially to employment law and going on from there. Can you talk about it in a broader term, going beyond just taxation laws, where this could be applied?
Yeah, so the way that we've developed this technology is it could apply ostensibly to any area of law. So we've started with tax law, we've moved on to employment law, and eventually our vision is that this technology can be applied to every area of law where you have courts reaching judgments. You can train algorithms to replicate very closely how judges are exercising their discretion. So there's no implicit limit to the application of this technology in law. And so over the course of the next decade, the next 2 decades, looking into the future, looking at the digital trends, this is where things are going. This is going to be, these kinds of tools are going to be emerging in every area of law and changing how lawyers practice, how courts work, changing the profession, I think, for the better.
Could you see this at some point being an actual legal system where you go into, instead of a judge, you enter in all of the facts and then it determines the result, like an AI would be the judge?
So I think in the far, far, far future, you can imagine a system like this influencing judges directly, or maybe even substituting for judges. I think that's a very long way off. And here's why. It actually ties into the earlier exchange we had about this helping to promote settlements. If you have these kinds of algorithms helping parties to settle the clear cases, what it means is that judging by human judges actually becomes more challenging, because the cases that are left going to court are those ones that are very centrally in that gray area, and they are inherently uncertain. And so the paradox of all of this is that human judging becomes more important, not less important than it would have been previously, because the judges really are tackling those more challenging cases all else the same. And so in the long run, when we have complete information about how all these disputes ought to be decided, then I think maybe algorithms can be, really, really indispensable in helping us resolve disputes. In the near term, I think their main function is to inform the decisions by litigants and potential litigants about how to settle their disputes without having to go to court, and to provide a resource to judges to become informed about what all the previous case law would suggest about the best way to resolve the dispute that's before them. So it's really an aid to human decision making is how I think about it, at least for the foreseeable future.
Well, I love that kind of concept of it, just to slim it down and, looking at it at that aspect to eventually make it easier for judges to get rid of the cases that are clearly defined, that take up all of their time, to work on things that require a little bit more of a human judgment factor into it, that gray area you mentioned. Well, it's really interesting, and I wanted to know for people out there who want to learn more about it or maybe even utilize the service, where's the best place for them to go?
Our website is a fantastic resource, www.bluejaylegal.com. The J is just the letter J. It's not, you don't spell it out. So bluejaylegal.com is a fantastic place to go. And thanks very much, Greg, for having me on the program today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us too. Really fascinating stuff. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for being here on Digital Trends Live. All right, so really interesting use of AI. That's one of the most fascinating use cases I think that we've talked about in a while. And we're seeing more and more of this, how all of this data, this era of big data that we're in, and all of these things that can be applied to different areas. But the legal system, I think we can all agree if you've ever had any kind of legal issues, it's nice to get a little bit of clarity. If you could just enter it in and be like, no, here's where we're at. So interesting. Go to digitaltrends.com. You can learn more about everything right there. Let's do this. We got to take a break. We got to come back. We're going to learn more about technology. We have some cutting edge technology that I'm going to talk about. One of them involves rats and cars. I'll just say that. But we've got a lot to talk about and more interviews all coming up here in just a minute. Stick around, back here with more Digital Trends Live. Well, hello, this is Digital Trends. Thanks for joining us. I'm Greg Nibbler. I appreciate it. We have a lot to talk about today, and I appreciate everybody who's joining us on whatever platform you're on. We broadcast on a lot of them, so congratulations, you found one of them, but hit that subscribe button. That way you get the notifications when we do go live. And let's talk about some more cutting-edge tech right now. Air taxis. That's a thing. Air taxis are something that we've seen a lot of companies that are working on, whether it's autonomous, whether it's electric vehicle. A lot of companies are trying to come up with this. Uber certainly is one of them, and there's a lot of proposals out there, but how far away are we from all of that? Sometimes it's quite a ways away, but there's a company that believes they are much closer than some of the other ones. And this company is called Lilium, and we've talked about them before. They're based out of Munich, and we've talked about their air taxis and what they've been working on. We saw a demonstration, maybe a couple of months ago, where they had one of their vehicles, one of their air taxis, their airplanes, if you will, lift up and then lift right back down. They said that was a demonstration. But looking at this right now, they have a new video that has come out, and this is showcasing a much more robust use of the actual vehicle itself. There it is. And because of that vertical takeoff idea, this is something that's big for them, saying that this would, and I do agree, that would be certainly a huge boost in that you could land anywhere, essentially like a helicopter, get up, take off. This is an electric vehicle. It runs on 36 all-electric jet engines. There are 36 engines on that thing. The aircraft has 0 operating emissions and requires less than 10% of its maximum 2,000 horsepower during horizontal cruise flight. So it doesn't use a lot of energy. That's really what that boils down to. The zero emission side of it is huge. And the big challenge when it comes to electric vehicles, especially electric vehicles that are going to fly, is battery storage. You need a lot of battery storage. Battery storage is heavy, and therefore it just kind of counteracts what you're trying to do when you do have these kinds of vehicles. But this is where they're saying that they've come up with solutions to counteract that. So a couple of more examples just on the technical side of it. They're saying that this one would be a 5-seater. So again, all electric. They say that because they can go up vertically and then take off horizontally, they would be able to have a lot of advantages just for commuting. They said that they could have a 300-kilometer range, and that's pretty big. A 300-kilometer range going, I believe, at 100 kilometers per hour. So that's also pretty amazing right there. If you think about getting rid of some commutes, you could have these on top of buildings. Their examples were in England. They're talking about going from Manchester to Birmingham, Birmingham to London, maybe main commuting areas that could take hours to get back and forth. This is something where you could just go take this and get there quickly. And they are not the only ones, but they do say that their service they're going to be going into, they've got one facility already completed, a manufacturing facility. They've got plans for a larger second one, and they say that their service would roll out in 2025. That may seem like a long way in the future, but seriously, it's 5 years. 5 years where we could have this, where this would be one. And this is with all of the other companies that are competing in this too when it comes to air taxis. And I think that there really is a realistic possibility we'll see these rolling out at least in major cities within 5 years. Certainly Lilium saying they'll be there in 5 years, but it's a fascinating industry to follow, and it's advancing very rapidly, as we just saw right there. So you can always follow along, though, with everything at digitaltrends.com and let us know what you think about electric air taxis. All right, let's talk about some other tech. I have some other things to bring you up to date with, and this is a guy that comes up here a lot. That is Mr. Elon Musk. Elon, you're still invited here to Digital Trends Live. We'll see if we can schedule him. But let's talk about Starlink this time. Starlink is Elon Musk's plan for global satellite internet. Everybody gets internet. And this is what he posted. This was actually a couple of days ago, talking about sending his tweet through space via his Starlink satellites. So Starlink, a subsidiary of SpaceX, and what they're working on is blanketing the entire globe with satellites. And there's a couple of big takeaways from what we've seen so far. So to give you just kind of a rundown of it, of where we're at right now, we are talking about all of these satellites that are being launched. They've launched quite a few so far, and with their goal is to get up to 13,000 or so. And we can take a look. We can take a look right there at some of the different ideas of it, of where it's going to go. So they're right now with 13,000 satellites is what they're originally going to do. They want to get up to 42,000 satellites blanketing the globe, and with 42,000, they could really cover a lot of what we're seeing out there right now, where you could have internet in very remote, rural areas, and different places where you could actually have high-speed satellite internet. This is a huge thing. This is something that's very important for a lot of people. This is something that we could actually see being utilized. Now, the key takeaway here that is coming out of this is that they're saying that you could possibly have it by mid-next year. And mid-next year would be huge. So if you think about it right now, a lot of people pay about $80 a month probably for satellite internet. And at $80 a month, if you could for $80 a month, you would be able to really have this solid internet connection no matter where you are. It's really a huge thing. So this is what they're talking about mid next year for USA and Canada, to where you could actually have satellite internet in all of those different places. That's a big thing. Would you want to subscribe to that service? Is that something you would want to do? Is that something you would want to actually take part in? I mean, certainly if it could drop my bill and I'd have internet no matter where I went, I would definitely be into it. But that's what we're finding out about Starlink. So you can read more about that at digitaltrends.com. Hi there. All right, let's continue on with some more news. And this one is a weird one, and this is a story that's going to be up at digitaltrends.com, and it has to do with some research about rats. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I'm bringing this up. It's research that you can also extrapolate that data and apply it to humans, but it has to do with how we interact with vehicles and relax. But the key reason I'm talking about this is because I want to play a video of rats driving cars. So this is what we're looking at. This is a study that is going on at the University of Richmond right now. And there you go. You can see the rat sitting in his nice little vehicle that they created. It's an all-clear vehicle. And then we have these videos. So that is a rat driving a car. So what goes on with this is they taught the rats how to get into these tiny little vehicles, how to pull the levers, how to drive it around. He's not a very good driver, but how to drive it around and go get their reward. this is huge, number one, just showing the intelligence of rats, which is also terrifying. But that is what we're looking at with that. So taking a look at how that rat's able to drive, the data, the details that they extrapolated out from that is that they're finding that the rats are more comfortable and relaxed when they're actually driving versus when they're a passenger. So some of them had different passengers on the side of it, and the rats that were passengers were not as relaxed as the rats that were driving. So really interesting study on that and talking about how that could be extrapolated, how that data could be utilized for humans, but pretty interesting. And regardless, it's videos of rats driving cars, like I was saying. So that's certainly something that you're not going to get out of your mind for a while. But that's a study that's out right now, so looking at how they're utilizing that data and just the tiny little cards that they made. It was pretty cool. All right, so that's what we have for that. Bringing you up to date on some trending tech stories. Here's what's coming up next, though. We are going to be talking to David Greenfield, who is the founder and medical director of the Center for Internet and Technology Addiction, talking about tech addiction. So that's coming up. Stick around back here in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. And welcome back to Digital Trends Live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As always, it's fun going through this show and talking about technology. But I'm going to guess for a lot of us that are out there, that if you're watching this show, if you're like me, you're on the internet a lot. And there are certain issues that come up with that. We're going to talk about some of that right now. Joining us, we have David Greenfield. And I want to make sure I get your title right. The founder and medical director of the Center for Internet and Technology Addiction. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sounds good.
Okay, good. So I got it right. Close enough. I know there's a lot in there, and let's talk about what this is and what the center is and what was the impetus for founding this.
Yeah. So I actually, believe it or not, started the Center for Internet and Technology Addiction back in 1997. So I've been doing this for a long time, back when we were on dial-up, believe it or not. So this is a long-standing issue that we saw coming many, many years ago, even before it reached the popular level of problem that we see now.
So you've been involved in this, for a long time, all the way back to dial-up. You were seeing some of these issues.
All the way from the very beginning. And this is pre-Wi-Fi, pre-laptop, certainly pre-smartphone, and certainly pre-high-speed internet. So, but even then, we saw that it had an addictive potential and would captivate people. And our research found that about 6% of people at that time were overusing it to a point where it met the criteria for addiction.
So, so seeing it all the way back then, let's talk about a little bit of that, how you've seen it change over the years. And I want to get into some of the studies that you have in particular right now and different ways that we can mitigate it. But how have you seen that change up to this current point?
Well, obviously, it's changed completely. The amount of intrusion of screen use in our lives has drastically increased. And part of that is the ease of access and availability of having a smartphone, which is essentially having a portal to the internet with you all the time. And it sort of functions like a giant slot machine. Every time you go online, depending on what the portal is, you never know what you're going to find, when you're going to find it, and how good it's going to be. And each time you find something or do something or get a notification for something or play something, and you get a little bit of pleasure from that, you get a hit of dopamine in the brain. And that variable reinforcement creates an addictive experience because we tend to repeat pleasurable behaviors. And what happens is the phone or our device or whatever portal you're using actually conditions us to start using it more and more without our even being aware of it.
And that's certainly something that, you know, as adults, we all have to deal with, but kids in particular, I know this is a huge issue, and we've seen study after study come out about this, about how kids are getting addicted to, you know, whatever it is, Facebook or any kind of anything. What are some different ways, I guess, that, maybe we should walk through some of the statistics.
Kids are more susceptible because they have the highest threshold for pleasure. In other words, they are very susceptible to wanting to elevate those areas of the brain that are pleasurable. And they also have the poorest level of judgment because the front part of their brain is not fully developed. So they're kind of a perfect storm for addiction. I mean, doing things like using apps that block, monitor, or filter, things like Circle or others can be helpful. But I think there's no substitute for parents sort of paying attention to what their kids are doing. And by all means, don't assume that just because it's technology and it's a screen and it's kind of cool, that your kids aren't doing things on it that might be destructive or distracting or life-altering.
What are some different ways that you can help? I mean, you mentioned Circle as something, and people don't know what Circle is. It's essentially a way to control access to the internet on devices.
It's one of the many apps on the market that you can set up parameters to limit when and where your child has access to their screen, whether it's on their tablet or they're on their phone or on the computer. It also can limit access to specific websites as well. The other thing you can do is, turn off notifications. So notifications send us a ping that there might be something pleasurable waiting for us, and it elevates dopamine at double the amount that normal use of the internet does. So every time you think there might be something good there, you're going to jump on and check it even more likely.
So what are some other I guess maybe tips and advice, or what are some other rules we should follow when it comes to the internet?
I think that one of the rules that you have to remember is that nobody can keep track of time when they're online or on a screen. So you have to assume that if you're on a screen, you're going to lose track of time, and if your child's on a screen, they're going to lose track of time. So you have to either help them provide limits or boundaries or ways to keep track of time, or they're gonna overuse it. So you have to remember that it is a mood altering, it's a drug, it's a digital drug. So you have to help them monitor that in a way that they can.
What is your stance? Oh, go ahead.
No, the other thing you want to do is, one of the things that we do suggest for people if they're using their phones too much is gray it out. Change the screen color to grayscale, to black and white. And your use will drop 30 to 40% instantly because it looks boring and you're not as interested in it. So the idea is to make it a less compelling experience. And the other thing, of course, is social media, because social media is where a lot of younger people waste their time. And realizing that social media has nothing to do with social interaction. It's really antisocial. The social media companies don't care about you spending time in social interaction. They just want your eyes on the screen. So the idea is to remember that there's nothing really socially nutritive that's going to happen on a social media site, and nothing good is going to happen in terms of real-time social interaction. In fact, the research shows just the opposite, that people feel more socially isolated when they're using a lot of social media.
What are some of the ramifications of being online too much, and how can one tell if they're actually going through something like this, like if they have symptoms of internet addiction?
Well, I mean, actually, symptoms of internet addiction are not much different than any other. Obviously, the biggest sign is that you're spending a lot of time online. Now, again, it's a little hard to figure out because we tend not to be aware of how much time we spend online. But when you look at your app or or the devices that are measuring your time online, and you see you've been on for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, that's not unusual. And you will probably not have an awareness of that amount of time. So one of the things is to increase that, as I said earlier, to make sure that you know how much time is passing. The other thing is you'll see changes in academic or social performance. Very often at the extreme, we see people really starting to do poorly in school, or they reduce their activity in sports or other social activities. There is an increase in isolation. And most notably, they'll get moody and irritable when you take it away or limit it. They'll have a sort of miniature withdrawal experience.
What do you think going forward? You know, clearly technology is not going away, and how much we're encouraged to be online, no matter what the platform is, isn't going away. How do you think this is going to affect us, say, 5 years from now?
I mean, it's hard to predict, but I think that if we don't learn to manage our technology is going to manage us, and I think we're going to be unhappier. In general, the research is pretty clear that technology, if it's overused, makes us less happy, less satisfied, less socially empathetic, more stressed, and more disconnected from ourselves and those we love. So I think the idea is to create a sustainable, moderated use of technology. Not no technology, because you're right, that's not going to happen. We all need to use it, but we need to use it in moderation, and to also not just use it like it's equivalent to sort of sitting down and eating a bag of potato chips unconsciously. You don't want to sit there and just scroll for 2 hours in social media or looking at YouTube videos that don't mean anything. You have to become conscious of what you really want your life to look like, and then fit your technology into that, as opposed to fit your life around your tech use.
What are some resources that people can go to find out more information and help balance their lives in a better way?
I think one of the resources that I like for families is Common Sense Media, which you can find online. Our site, virtual-addiction.com, has a lot of information for families and parents, and we also have a video series for families to learn how to manage technology use. I'm sure Circle has a lot of information on their website as well, and there's a number of other places that people can look to find out information on how to manage their screen use. The idea, ironically, a lot of it is on the internet. There's not a lot of real-time information out there. And again, the internet's not all bad. It's just very powerful. And our message is that it's very powerful, and you have to respect that, because it will take away your living.
Well, David, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on Digital Trends Live to talk about this and just really, illuminate some of the different ways that it can affect you and how important it is to manage it and balance that and have that digital work-life balance in a much better way. And thanks so much for being here on Digital Trends Live.
You're welcome. Now turn off your computer.
In 10 minutes, I will. All right, really quick, thank you so much, David, for joining us here on Digital Trends Live, and thanks to everybody who's been with us here throughout the show. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at some of the comments that have come through across social media platforms, and I know that there have been a lot that have been posted online right now about what's going on with Zuckerberg and the testimonies that are going on, but also we have our platforms where people post comments. So let me prepare myself here. Whether I'm going to weep or I'm going to read, I don't know, but it is Read 'em and Weep, part of our show here every day at Digital Trends Live. So let's take a look at some of the comments. We'll pull these up. I have not seen these, so I'll be looking at them for the first time myself. Let's go here. Mark Reese. Squirrels stole the pumpkins. Hashtag ruin Halloween in 4 words. All right. That's solid. I didn't know that was a trending topic. Ruin Halloween in 4 words. Squirrels stole the pumpkins. I need a drink. That's another way that we could do that. All right. So anyway, squirrels stole the pumpkins. There we go. Will Black. Steve Ben. Oh, God, that is horrifying. I'm sorry. I don't care what side you're on of anything. That is a horrifying picture. I didn't know we were going to talk about nightmares today. Steve Bannon is here. There it is. There's another one for the trending topic of ruin Halloween in 4 words. Gave onion caramel apples. Oh, you are a bastard, but that is hilarious. That is funny. I'm sorry. That is a funny prank. Now I do want to see something happen with that. Muna, no candy, salad instead. Oh yeah, that's also a terrible thing. Terrible thing. Mini salad. We had, when I was trick-or-treating when I was a kid, there was a dentist in the neighborhood, and we'd just give you a toothbrush and toothpaste. It was the worst house ever. That is a terrible way to spend Halloween. So no candy, salad instead. I do appreciate that, though. That's solid. All right, that is Muna on Twitter. Again, taking a look at some of the trending topics here for Read 'em and Weep, going across the internet. All right, here we go for our site. Rory, regarding almost every state has joined New York in an antitrust investigation into Facebook, and I feel it only appropriate that I use the platform itself to watch it unfold, right? I know. We always talk about Facebook like, oh, they have too much control, but I'm on there every day. We're broadcasting live on there. Thanks for watching us, by the way, on Facebook Live or whatever platform you're on. We do appreciate it. But yes, Rory, I totally understand the irony in that. Brian Rogers regarding expert argues that fears of automation are overblown. If you can do it, a robot can do it better. Plus, it won't need breaks, vacation, sick leave, a pension, etc. Ooh, yeah, you're not entirely wrong on some of that. We've actually had 2 sets of podcasts for Trends with Benefits. We did a 2-parter podcast where we actually covered a bunch of that, talking about that topic in general, the future of work and whether robots are going to take your job. Kind of analyzed it from both sides of things. But yeah, there's a lot. Turns out, though, there are some jobs the robots are not going to be good at. But you'll have to listen to the podcast to find out what those are. I guess that's a tease. Go to find Trends with Benefits wherever you get podcasts. Hit subscribe to that. And again, thank you, everyone, for joining us. So that was Read 'em and Weave, taking a look at some of the comments. And we encourage comments on whatever platform you are watching, wherever you find us, wherever you read information. Stay up to date with everything going on in technology at digitaltrends.com. And we are here every single day, bringing you 90 minutes of content, making it through with 90 minutes of content every single day. So we thank you for joining us, and we do really appreciate everybody. And tomorrow we've got another great lineup of shows. We have Caleb Jennison who's going to be in here talking about televisions. Shocking. So Caleb will be here with that and all kinds of guests. So stick around, stay tuned every single day. We'll be back tomorrow with more Digital Trends Live.